Evening everybody and welcome along to the SimGrid. It's the penultimate round of Season 4 of the Sprint Cup. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty now of the season. Just 2 more 90-minute races to go before we decide the 4th champion in this ever more competitive series of racing. We are at the Circuit Park Zandvoort here this evening, ready and set for what is set to be a thrilling and I reckon pretty unpredictable race. The weather forecast is that there may be a little bit of inclement weather on the way, and on such a tight, twisting but very high-speed circuit, we could be in for a few surprises along the way. Andy McEwan is up here in the commentary box tonight, not joined by my regular co-commentator David Christie. He's found something infinitely more exciting to do tonight, so instead I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Chaz Draycott, who is with me for this evening's race. Chaz, your first time working on the Sprint Cup in Season 4 at least, but I know that you've seen these races in the past and you know exactly how exciting it can be, especially as we get down towards the business end of the championship.
Yes, indeed. Hello, Andy. Hello, everybody. Great to be here once again, and you are very right indeed. These races can be absolutely phenomenal. I've covered a lot of the endurance racing over on the SimGrid, and I know sort of what the 3-hour, the 6-hour, even the 10 and 12, 24-hour races are like, but when you try and compress all of the great racing that we always get from the SimGrid into an hour's race, it is just absolutely mind-blowing. So much can happen so quickly, and of course the main thing is the drivers don't have long to recover from any issues that they have throughout the race. There's a lot of things, of course, keeping the playing field nice and level as well that we'll go over the course of the evening, but I am really looking forward to this because the last time I covered the Sprint Cup, it was here at Zandvoort and we had an absolute belter.
Yeah, it's one of those circuits, isn't it, that it is truly unique, a real challenge for the drivers, actually. This is the sort of what we now have to refer to, I guess, as the old Zandvoort, as in pre-Formula 1 modifications, and this is actually the way that I prefer it because it's that little bit tighter. It really does feel like one of those proper, unforgiving, old-school circuits. Not that easy to overtake here either, is it? So if teams find themselves in a position where they have to sort of dig themselves out of a hole, try and gain some track position, you're not going to find it as easy to do here as you would have done, for example, a couple of weeks ago at the Nürburgring.
Yeah, for sure, and I totally agree with you. You know, I admire what Formula 1 have done to Zandvoort to sort of bring it back to the sort of more modern age of motorsport. Not that it's that old a circuit, but old school tracks like this are just absolutely perfect as they are. You know, they don't need messing with. I mean, look at look at our own country with Alton Park, Brands Hatch, places like that. You know, lots of undulation, Cadwell Park as well. Circuits that don't need messing with. You know, you can improve the safety, put barriers here, there, and everywhere where you need them. But yeah, we don't need to mess with them too much. There are your championship standings, and random pasta bowl at the top. 3 race wins in a row, Andy. They can wrap up the title tonight if they get a 4th one, but there's an interesting driver situation going on there, isn't there?
There is indeed, because the team that, as you rightly say, have won the last 3 races at Kyle Army, Bathurst and the Nürburgring, Michael Tauscher, who has been on top form for the last few weeks, is absent. He's actually on holiday at the moment, so they've brought the super sub in. Cody Pride will be stepping in to his racing boots here this evening, and that's something we'll talk about in more detail, I'm sure, once we get into the evening's proceedings. But that little change there to the team dynamic at this crucial point of the season could be exactly what the opposition really needed, because Random Pastable have just been on dominant form, truly dominant form. Last time out at the Nürburgring, nobody could touch them. No one really could get within half a second a lap of them, and they ran away to a comfortable 3rd victory of the season. That means they arrive here at Zandvoort on 158 points. As you can see, the nearest rivals to them are the UKOG 47 McLaren squad on 130 points, but they are winless so far this season. They've never been out of the top 5, but yet to get themselves into the top 2 spots. And if the results fall right this evening, Random Pastable could actually move completely out of reach of the UKOG team and the others that are still pretty close. There are in total 12 teams within 100 points of the championship lead, and 100 points is significant because that is how many more points are left on the table. You score 50 points for winning a round of the Sprint Cup, and we have 2 more opportunities for teams to do that. Zandvoort, though, is a circuit, Chaz, that I think will suit some of the mid-engine cars, in particular the McLaren, so that may well just be enough to drag Random Pastable back towards some of the opposition. Before we dive then too much into what's going to go on tonight, let's introduce ourselves, shall we, to this magnificent circuit, the Zandvoort circuit.
It's time for
with
the
our
penultimate
onboard
hot
hot
lap
lap.
of Season 4 of Sprint Cup here on the SimGrid. We're on the North Sea coast in the Netherlands at Circuit Zandvoort on board the Porsche 911. Down from 6th gear at 245 kph through into 2nd gear through Tarzan, accelerating out of the corner, now heading through this nice little complex through Gerlachbocht. 3rd gear at 140 kph, hard on the brakes down for 1st gear at about 90 kph through Hugenholzbocht, named after the late John Hugenholz, who penned not just this track but also Suzuka. Also now going through Hunsrück as you're putting the power down, accelerating through this next section, which brings you up to Rob Slaughtermacherbocht, and you're going to be approaching 5th gear, 230 kph as you brake for Schevelach, 4th gear, 177 kph. Next up, it's the right-hander here at Masters. 3rd gear, 150, take the apex, run the car a little bit wide, now through into turn 9. And you're going to go down back to 2nd gear once again, accelerate out of the corner, sweep to the left, then to the right, through into turn 10, another 2nd gear corner at about 90 kph on the apex. And now the fast-flowing section that leads you down to the Hans Ernst-Bocht, originally known as the Audi S's at one point. Through into the right-hander, then down into the left, and you're going to be hitting the brakes hard, not getting into 1st gear yet at this circuit, nor at all at this circuit apart from Hugenholz. Through into Kumo, 3rd gear at 130, and then you put the power down, you really carry the momentum through the Arie Luyendyk Bocht, a legend in sports cars and also Indy cars in his own right, out of the final corner, accelerating towards the line, and that's a hot lap here at Zandvoort.
So there you go then, your chance to acquaint yourself with the 2.6 miles of the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit, something that the drivers have already been doing in practice. They are now, though, heading into this 20-minute qualifying session, already nearly 5 minutes in. And look at who is at the top. George Boothby in the UKOG 47 McLaren, the car, Chaz, that is 2nd place in the championship at a track that we know will suit this car. And George doing at the moment exactly what they have to try and apply some pressure here to the championship leaders.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you said it before, they've got very, very close before now, but they haven't managed to actually take a victory yet. They've not been on the top step, but tonight is the time where they really, really have to do that just to keep themselves in the championship fight. There is quite the gap. As we see, well, there you go. Malinowski says, just wait a minute, boys, watch this. And Random Pastable goes to the top of the times straight off the bat. So instantly, the subject changes again to now what can the number 47 McLaren do to come back at them. But still, we can't forget about the rest of the field as well. And there's, times in there at the moment that are identical between Becker and Kisser at the moment, both 849 thousandths of a second, if you're going to be exact, off the top spot. But look again how close these times are. This is another thing about Sprint Cup with the splits that we have here on the SimGrid. That is absolutely unbelievably close between all them, and more identical times further down the board as well.
Yeah, but this has been the theme, really, of the Sprint Cup qualifying sessions this season. Very, very tight, and also it all seems to come down to the final couple of minutes anyway. So, in a way, you take these lap times with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because we've seen drivers on multiple occasions, including our most recent race at the Nürburgring, finding pretty big chunks of time right at the very end of the session. We're talking sort of 3 or 4 tenths of a second on their final lap in a session which sees almost the entire field covered by around 1 second or so. Boothby then about to come through and complete another lap. He's been demoted down to 5th since he last saw the start-finish line, and 1:34.467 is the time to beat. And looking at the sector times, he is tracking to be very, very close to the fastest time so far. And well, he is very close, but he's not quite quick enough there to jump the 992 car. And so Boothby puts the McLaren onto the front row in second place.
An interesting car to keep an eye on as well tonight is the Bentley. We were discussing behind the scenes before we went live that the Bentley is going to be a very difficult car to beat tonight. Obviously the ballast as well, not really affecting cars as much with the sort of bigger bodies, the more sort of large spread of mass, let's call it. Cars like your Bentleys, your GTRs, your Lexuses, you know, your more bulky machines. The Bentley is the king of all bulky machines. That's why people call it the Boatley at the end of the day. But this thing not only looks fantastic and sounds fantastic, but it goes well as well. 30 kilos on board the Bentley tonight and the Porsche, as Seville goes up into 7th place in the number 17 Ferrari. And in terms of the ballast, we have 20 kilos on the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo and 15 kilos on the McLaren. The other cars are ballast-free in terms of the balance of performance for this round. So I am intrigued to see how well the Porsche handles its weight. We know that the Bentley can do it quite well, but I mean, the 992 Porsche at the top of the time says so far that it's not got much of an issue with it.
No, the Porsche has carried the ballast pretty well all season, to be honest, and I know they were carrying weight last time in the Nürburgring, but it didn't stop that car being by far and away the class of the field. Not just the 992 example, but all of those rear-engine cars were somewhere towards the sharp end in the qualifying session in the race. Flavio Mancini here we're following in the Racing Point number 99 Bentley, which is 13th fastest at the moment. Just to back up Chaz's point, though, we have 2 of these big Bentleys in the top half dozen at the moment, with Montalbano 4th and Melbourne there in 6th position. It's still Malinowski that's fastest in the Porsche at the moment, though. Boothby is pitted now, so he's after a fresh set of tyres for the second half of this qualifying session, but those that are still circulating, of course, will have slightly clearer track as a result. Giuseppe Montalbano is one of them. Now, the Omega G Performance team are 3rd in the points. They are a further 27 points, though, behind the second-place McLaren team. They jump into 3rd place on the time, so the top 3 cars in the session then are now the top 3 in the championship, in championship order as well. But for Giuseppe Montalbano and his teammate, they really do need another strong run tonight at a circuit, again, a bit like UKOG, that should favour their car. Really, anything less than a win tonight is not really going to be good enough for them if they're to keep their championship hopes alive.
Yeah, that's it. They're going to have everything measured relatively to how that Porsche gets on tonight, to be honest. So the pressure is on. We've got another Bentley going inside the top 10. Flavio Mancini, that's a fantastic looking livery as well on the Team Racing Point car. Looks absolutely awesome. We've got King improving as well. And he goes 12th, 6 tenths of a second off. 3 thousandths of a second either side, though. We're up at 3 thousandths down. Ogorodnikov 3 thousandths up on him. That is literally the margins we're dealing with there. If actually he was about 9 thousandths, maybe make that even more. Let's say, what, 18 thousandths slower, he'd be down 4 places. It's just absolutely mind-blowing in terms of the times. Here is Igor Ogorodnikov, someone that needs no introduction on the SimGrid, an absolute star on our screens. Always entertaining, sometimes very dramatic, sometimes just appears out of nowhere from under the radar, but always very quick indeed. Interesting to see how he handles the Aston Martin tonight. Currently the 2nd highest Aston in the field, with James Parker 5th place in the 888 car, but 84 thousandths between the top 2. I mean, if it comes down to some championship points later on in the night, as Ogorodnikov has a moment, then those 84 thousandths might come back to haunt them if they didn't have the starting grid position, really, couldn't they, Andy?
Yeah, because track position is just so important here at Zandvoort, as we've mentioned already. So for Ogorodnikov, 11th at the moment, that ain't good enough. He needs to try and find a bit more time than that. He was about a quarter of a second up on his previous best lap, though, around 2/3 of the way around this one, so he should jump up from 11th. The question is how far? Well, the answer is nowhere. The final sector, that moment that he had going through the Hans Ernst spot, that turn 11-12 chicane, unfortunately costing him a chance to improve on that occasion. We're into the second half of the session then, and Maciej Malinowski is back out on track in the 992 championship leading Porsche, and he is pushing on now to try and strengthen his advantage at the top of the times. Mikhail Novakovsky here, another one of the McLarens, jumps up a few spots, gets into the top 10 actually, just over half a second off pole, but Malinowski continues to push on. 84 one-thousandths of a second, the only thing that separates him from George Boothby second, Giuseppe Montalbano third, and Jonas Savalainen, who was in the wars last time at the Nürburgring, is there in fourth position in that number 11 Ferrari. And the number 11 car is another of our potential championship winners. And Chaz, that's the only other team, other than Random Pastable, to have won a race all season. So I expect good things from that number 11 car.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a real shame, actually. I was looking through the results earlier. That's one of those teams that when they go really well. They've won a race, they've finished second, but then the other 50% of their season is a DNF and a 31st place. It's either right near the top or barely didn't even turn up, really. But just coming back to Malinowski, that 992 Porsche, that looked so planted as it was moving across the sort of first to second sector there. The car looked so alive. It was just amazing the way it was moving over the crest of the hill, the weight transfer one way to the other. These Porsches have always been really joyous cars to watch as a commentator and as a spectator. You know, they just have such great body language about them, with the engine being so far back, and the way that the weight gets moved one way to the other is just a real amazing thing to watch. Now here is Novakovsky in the very bold and very contrasty carbon SimSport McLaren, another car that really looks like it's going well, but he's not quite able to crack into the top 10 yet, but he might be just about to do that. Let's have a look at what happens when he crosses the line. He's actually down to 14th, up to 3rd. There you go. Smashing stuff by Novakovsky. That's 2 McLarens in the top 3.
I mean, that was quite an improvement, wasn't it, then, from the team that have only had one top 10 finish all season so far, but now they're demoted a place by Jonas Savalainen, who gets the Gripax Engineering Ferrari onto the front row, just 9 one-thousandths of a second away from Malinowski's pole-sitting time. So we now have the top 3 cars covered by less than a tenth of a second, but George Boothby is improving again. We're following him through the final couple of corners then, out of the Arie Luyendyk curve onto the pit straight, and are we going to get the McLaren ahead of the 992 Porsche for pole position? The answer is yes, by over a tenth of a second. Fantastic effort that from George Boothby, and that will now knock Malinowski down to second and Savalainen down to third. And suddenly, Chaz, we have someone enjoying an enormous 1/10 of a second advantage at the top. But for how much longer? Malinowski back across the start-finish line and pips him again by 12 one-thousandths of a second. So ignore what I was saying there, Chaz. It is still as close as you like.
I'll tell you what, I've always wanted to commentate on tennis, but I think you'd do a better job of it than I would, mate. Flipping heck. Fantastic stuff, though, from these guys. Trading times with the tiniest of margins, but as Michael Hamlet has informed us in the background right now, the track has got very good for these guys right now. That's a very bland way of saying it, but it's basically come to some fantastic driving conditions for them, and we're going to see a lot of improvements now. Here's Tinko van der Velde for Sidemax Motorworks. He's heading for the pits in the Lambo, the only Lambo in the field. And now this is a livery that I spotted earlier that I absolutely love. The Garage 991, powered by Equipa Ferrari. That is as bold as you get when you don't have a red Ferrari. The blue underneath sort of reminds me of the number, I think it was 39 Ferrari that competed in the 2020 Nürburgring 24 Hours, that actually started on the front row of the grid. Nobody expected a Ferrari to do that well at Nürburgring at the time, but it did absolutely amazingly well. But these guys have added a lot of bright yellow to it, and it looks phenomenal. But through the left-hand, almost chicane hairpin combo that he goes through there, looking to just improve the tiniest bit. He's 21 thousandths behind Ruppert ahead, but apparently still on for improvement at the moment, judging by the sectors, but he is bailing on the time now. So he's going to come in, try and get some fresh boots on. And this is it now. This is the sort of moment where everybody's going to come in, just go absolutely all guns blazing for that final lap, but they need to find the space first. So there's a lot of scrambling about to go on, isn't there?
Yes, because we've got some, 28 cars qualifying in the same session and only 2.6 miles to try and fit them all. And it's amazing how, in a qualifying session in particular, they always seem to find themselves on the same bit of racetrack as everybody else. And you get everyone sort of desperately trying to find track position where there really isn't any available. And again, we saw that, didn't we, when Formula 1 made its return to Zandvoort just under a week ago, with traffic definitely being a big talking point after their qualifying session. Chris Melbourne then bigs the big Bentley out of the final corner, and it looks like he might improve on 13th place here. Remember, he was as high as 6th at one point. Montalbano's just gone through and was 4th. He's now 5th, though, because Chris Melbourne did find a big chunk, and he is now the highest placed of the Bentley Continentals, up there in 3rd position. That was some effort.
That was fantastic stuff, and you say this track's 2.6 miles long. I think the Bentley's about 2 miles of that, isn't it, to be fair? But yeah, really, really good effort there to go up into 3rd position. Great improvement, and we've got a number of them now, Michael telling us, that are going to be improving. This is Pavlis in the McLaren. A great lap so far, according to the sectors. Oh, he's had a bit of a moment there, catches a bit of the gravel, but that might actually open up the final corner for him in the Carbon Sim Sport Blue Machine. Needs a decent run down the straight. Very important final corner here, and he's just outside of the top 10, just over 0.4 of a second down. But I honestly still can't believe my eyes with how close these times are. It's absolutely amazing to see. All it takes is one, maybe just a clip of the gravel like we saw there from Pavlis, and all of a sudden you can lose 3 places worth of time, maybe even more than that, maybe 4 or 5.
Well, I mean, the top 23 of them, 24 really, are covered by a fraction over 1 second. So yeah, if you drop a 10th, which is very easy to do really, then you could find yourself dropping several rows on the grid. Marcel Villert here is one of the few drivers in fairness, that find themselves out of that magic 1 second window, but he's going to try and find that extra couple of tenths he needs here as he comes across the line. Well, he doesn't quite find that, but he does jump up 1 space into 25th. Sheldon Muscat in the other GT Omega Bentley is 22nd at the moment. And yeah, just looking further down the order, actually, Michael Hamlet's just spotted this as well. Harry Spears in that 285 Mercedes, all the way down in 27th place. But Chaz, he's only 1.2 seconds off pole position. I would be very pleased with myself if I could get within 1.2 seconds of the fastest times in this session. You do not have to be off your game by much, do you?
No, definitely not. I mean, reflecting what you say there, you know, if I was within 1.2 minutes of these guys, I'd be really, really chuffed, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's very, very strange. That's not what we normally see from Harry Spears. So potentially it could just be that the Mercedes isn't suiting around here or something to that effect. Anyway, I mean, he's just over a second outside of it now as the times have changed. But even then, you know, there's only thousandths between him and the cars around him. Muscat moves up to 19th place. Czarnecki now goes up to 18th place and puts Muscat down into 20th. And that's the thing, again, I mentioned the game of tennis before, but you can literally put a lap in, 2 other people can improve by less than 1/10 of a second, and you'll be back down to where you started.
Oh, it's high pressure stuff, isn't it, out there as they try and get this all important track position. As we've said, Florian Becker here had been a couple of tenths up on his previous best, but it looks like he's lost a bit of time in the final set. We'll follow him across the line anyway, though. 1 3/4 minutes still to go. Becker does not improve his position there and stays in that 19th place. Here's Harry Spears then in the Sidemax Motorworks Mercedes, car 285, which looks like it might well be improving on this lap. They've not had a stellar season, it must be said, this team. They find themselves 20th in the points, a DNF at the 3rd round at Bathurst certainly didn't help them. Igor Rodnikov just misses out on the top 10. Here comes Spears. Can he improve on 24th? He found a good chunk of time on the previous lap, finds another couple of tenths now to move within the magic 1 second, but still only 22nd place. Right, what about the battle for pole position then? 21 thousandths of a second between Maciej Malinowski and George Boothby, the championship rivals here. I'd be happy with them on the front row together in either order, but I'm sure Boothby would rather like to be lining up ahead of the Porsche when they run down to turn 1.
Yes, for sure. We get them now side by side on screen. Malinowski just going around some of the traffic there in the middle of the field. One of the Ferraris getting out of the way very quickly. Boothby gets what looks like a very, very quick exit out of the penultimate corner. Flings it around the long right. Gets it nice and smooth on the exit. He doesn't take any curb, doesn't take any gravel. And across the line he goes 63 thousandths of a second to the good. But Malinowski is apparently, in the words of Michael Hamlet, on a blinder right now, Andy. This could put it to bed again, and the tennis commentary might have to come back out.
Well, Boothby has time for one more lap, doesn't he? And I reckon Malinowski might just squeak through before the checkered flag too. So this isn't over yet. There is a chance here for them both to improve once again. Malinowski then, to try and get pole position back, comes across the start-finish line and takes it. Wow, by over a quarter of a second. That was a blinder, wasn't it? And that might just be a little bit too much to ask for George Boothby. And Chaz, doesn't that just sum up the entire season so far for Random Pastable? Every time it looks like someone has something for them, they seem to find that extra bit of speed that they need. And it looks now with Boothby, I think, bailing from his final lap, like pole position will go to our championship leaders.
You know what, I don't mean this to sort of compare anybody to Michael Schumacher in any way, but there's a YouTube video that I see very, very often called Michael Schumacher Shatters the Morale, where everybody's put in really good times and got very close to him in qualifying, and I think he goes out and goes like 0.8 of a second quicker and just absolutely decimates everyone. But that's exactly what they've just done there. And Michael Hamlet, just before they got to the line, said, "This is an absolute wrecking ball." And you were not joking, Michael. Wow. Unbelievable. But if you consider the margins that we've seen all throughout this qualifying session and how close everybody is, you know, there's only 3,000 separating like 3 drivers in certain cases. But to go and do that by not just a tenth, which would have been good anyway, not just 2 tenths, but a quarter of a second and change, that is just absolutely magic by Malinowski. Amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff. We currently have as well Josh Inman, who is 0.3 of a second up from his middle sector, so that McLaren could jump well up the order. He goes up to 21st place. But again, I mean, the qualifying session itself was exciting. I can't wait to see what the race has in order now. Flipping heck.
Told you it would be good, and as we've said, with championships potentially on the line tonight, although UKOG qualifying second certainly means that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for Random Pastable to wrap the championship up this evening, but that just adds an extra dynamic, an extra layer of difficulty now to what is about to lie ahead, which is 90 minutes of racing coming up very shortly, so do not go anywhere. That was just the appetizer. The main course is on its way. It is, though, the 992 Porsche then that gets the pole position here at Zandvoort with their big championship rivals next. And then on row number 2, you've got Chris Melbourne, who sort of flew under the radar a bit there. We saw him come across the line, improved to 3rd place, but I don't think we made enough of that, really, because the focus was elsewhere on the championship battle. But for Chris Melbourne, in that number 70 Bentley, Chaz, he could not care less about this championship fight that's going on around him. That is their best qualifying effort of the season. It's by far their best opportunity to try and go for a win. And that braking zone into the first corner, it ain't half tempting to throw it up the inside 3 wide, isn't it? So he could be a real cat among the pigeons.
Oh yeah, and what a big cat amongst the pigeons as well. It's certainly one that's eaten a few pigeons before in the form of the Bentley. So that could be, again to coin a phrase now sort of copyrighted by Michael Hamlet, an absolute wrecking ball, to be honest, that Bentley in there. And I mean, you say that the car is strong around here. We saw that it goes well in qualifying, of course, but if I'm honest, I always try and sort of predict who's going to do well in these races, see who's going to be a dark horse, and, you know, try and be the gobby one that picks someone that starts 13th to come through and finish 5th. But I have no idea. You know, you could still have the number 992 machine absolutely disappear off up the road. You know, they could suddenly have found something pace-wise and disappear, or they could have people tailing them for the entire race. Something could go wrong in the pit stops. There's 1,000,001 different variables, even still, in an hour. I was going to say just an hour sprint race, but, you know, an hour, a lot can happen in that time, especially with pit stops involved. This could go any which way. And if I'm honest, no disrespect to the 992 guys, I wouldn't like to see the title wrapped up tonight. I want this to go to the final round, so I want to see them have to get their elbows out and fight for this one.
Yes, well, if they are to win the championship tonight with a round to spare, then they have to finish in the top 9 as a bare minimum. So that, in and of itself, seems fairly likely. The question is where everybody else finishes then, because, for example, a 9th place finish for Random Pastable would win them the championship, but only if the UKOG car didn't score, and the same were true of OMG Performance and such like. So we'll get into this when we get down to the business end of the race, but there is a possibility if UKOG have problems, then that might well cost them the championship. But, you know, we're talking about the championship a lot, but that is sort of the point we're here, really. There is a championship on the line, and if you are first or second in the points, and you know that you can either wrap it up tonight, or that you've got to perform tonight to prevent your opposition wrapping it up, the extra bit of pressure can sometimes lead to mistakes. It can lead to you getting a bit too involved in a battle you don't really need to, and that is where occasionally we see people really trip up. Let's take a look though down the grid, shall we? Maciej Malinowski then on pole position with George Boothby in the McLaren alongside him. Then you've got on row number 2 Chris Melbourne there in that number 70 Volante Racing Bentley. What a brilliant effort from him. Jonas Savalainen in the Gripax Engineering Ferrari that is up there in the points but needs to try and bounce back from that DNF last time. They line up 4th on the grid. Giuseppe Montalbano put in a good effort there in the 340 GT Omega Bentley. He will line up 5th ahead of Marco Bischoff in the 991 Ferrari. Then you've got Mikhail Novakovsky in that Carbon SimSport McLaren. He is 7th on the grid. And then surprisingly, the only other Porsche in the top 10 is the number 15 Unicorns of Love example, piloted there by Nicholas Huben. He was 8th fastest. Darren King is mathematically still in championship contention. He lines up 9th on the grid, ahead of Killian Ryan Meenan, another car that could still wrap up the title in theory, the 888 Aston Martin rounding out the top 10. Then you've got the number 17 Pulse SimSport car there, Christensen ahead of Igor Ogorodnikov. He'll want to move forward from 12th place on the grid. Lucas Kreutzer in the 96 Lamborghini, qualified by Tinko van der Velde, is 13th. Felix Rupert is a long way down the order compared to where I expected him to be, so the 71 Aston Martin, another to keep your eye on. Marius Forzidlo's Carbon SimSport number 7 car lines up 15th, ahead of Sasha Glatter there in the number 81 car. And then another Porsche, that is Florian Becker, who was higher up than that in the middle part of the session, but didn't improve as others did at the end of the session, so he starts this race from 17th. Sheldon Muscat is the next Bentley. He's 18th, and you don't have to go much further back to find another one. That one is the 99 Team Racing point car of Mancini, with Czarnecki rounding out that top 20. Then we start getting towards the tail end of the grid. Josh Inman's number 94 McLaren is 21st. 22nd is the 728. That's Gabriele Gargini's Porsche. And then you've got Sesha in the Mercedes, and the Harry Spears piloted 285 Sidemax Motorworks Mercedes, I should say, which is right there towards the tail end of the order. A couple of rows then is where we find, first of all, Florian Durkop's Porsche, then you've got Bastian Offerman's BMW, the only BMW in the field, and then a pair of Aston Martins at the back in the shape of Marcel Villa, who again you'd think would be a bit quicker than that, and Robin Aitos, who rounds out the 28 car field. So, Chaz, a minute or so before the green flag lap gets underway, and the tension just starting to rise now. Back to the point I made before we went down the grid, those top 2 on the grid, they both know the significance of getting into that first corner first, but they're also both acutely aware of the fact that they must finish this race. Random Pastabol to try and wrap up the title, and UKOG 47 to try and prevent them doing so. This is going to be a nervy run into turn 1, I think.
Yeah, for sure. This is going to be absolutely nerve-wracking for the drivers, nerve-wracking for us. But like you said before, you know, the pressure can do some very interesting things to these drivers. It can either inspire them to perform way better than they have done at other points in the season, or they can absolutely crumble these drivers to bits. You know, they'll just fall apart and they'll bottle it, as we say in the industry. But I honestly think that these drivers are at a high enough level where the pressure will motivate them. You know, I'll see a lot of these drivers continuously performing so well at their absolute peak performance. So yeah, I don't really want to try and call this one, but I think we all know who everyone needs to beat tonight, and a lot of them potentially could work together to do that. I just want to clarify as well, I know I've made an absolute backside of myself by saying all night so far this is an hour-long race, when of course it's 90 minutes. I meant to say an hour and a half, but no, clearly not. Anyway, you can see the cars very comically bouncing around as they do, as they go up on the jacks and then back down, just in case they make any sort of last-minute changes. Headlights on some of them as well. And that's going to be quite interesting as well here, because it's not the lightest of conditions here at the moment. It's only 2:05 in the sim, but it's a bit murky, isn't it? It's not really too hot, it's not too bright and too sunny, but it's also not fantastic for visibility. It seems a bit gloomy. I mean, you've got a shot of it there at turn 1 where it looks a little better, but from that previous shot, looked like maybe a bit of the gloom setting in. That could either help track temperature or make it a bit worse for some of them that have got setups that run well in the heat.
Yeah, I mean, it helps grip levels when it is cool and overcast until it rains. And then that doesn't really help grip levels at all. And I did spot there the 30-minute forecast didn't have any rain in it, but that doesn't mean that it won't appear at some point in the second half of the race. So we'll keep an eye to the skies, we'll keep an eye to the track as well. Chaz, you may not be confident in predicting a winner, but 70% of our YouTube winners at the viewers at the moment think that the 992 car will win a fourth race in a row. If you haven't put your vote in yet on that YouTube chat, then do so. Let us know what you think. Will they be able to get that fourth victory and all but seal the championship here tonight? Or will somebody else, whether it be the UKOG car that they're fighting for the points lead with, or one of the many other teams out there, be able to stop them doing it? The green flag lap then underway, and they get a chance to make their way around, get a bit of heat into the tyres, although you do notice, don't you, Chaz, particularly in ACC it seems, that you don't see cars weaving around all over the place trying to generate some heat. These GT3 cars, they're actually not full to drive on cold tyres, so they want to get the tyres into a decent window, but they don't want to overwork them here on the green flag lap, knowing how many miles they're going to have to put on them once the race gets started.
Yeah, that's it. It's quite an intriguing sort of warm-up lap that you do see, because it's not really a warm-up lap, it's just sort of a lukewarm-up lap, because they only get to a certain window, as you called it. You know, they don't want to work them too much. In other series all around the world, you know, even in the real world, if you watch the British Touring Car Championship, you'll see people waving really aggressively, and especially in front-wheel drive cars, even lifting the rear wheels off the ground, they're turning that hard. I've been covering the Clio Cup Europe Championship this year, and drivers there was actually a driver that got the car on two wheels. He weaved that hard on the warm-up lap once, leaning on only the left-hand wheels, and, you know, people really do go for it. But here, it's more of just a sightseeing lap. It's almost like a really fancy driver's parade, to be honest, but it's still necessary for them just to get whatever temperature they need, mainly just getting temperature in the brakes, making sure that they're working for, of course, the first corner, the very famous Tarzan bocht at the end of the straight. And right now, everybody is slowing down and getting into the necessary order they need to be in, and making sure that they're ready for the start of this race, Andy. It's going to be an absolute belter either way.
It is, and what happens in the next 20 seconds or so could be so crucial. Getting into, and more importantly out of, that first corner cleanly is going to be key here, not just for winning the race, but also potentially for winning the championship. Malinowski then on pole position, George Boothby alongside. We ride on board with Chris Melbourne, who starts the Flanty Racing Bentley from third place. We watch the red lights. When they go out, we're away and racing for 90 minutes here in the SimGrid Sprint Cup, and it's a decent start made by Malinowski from the inside of row number one. Boothby, though, could choose to try and hang it out around the outside. It's a banked first corner. He sends the McLaren in. They're door to door as they come out of turn number one, but Malinowski on the inside gets out of the corner ahead. There's a shunt further back though. That's the Lamborghini there that's off on the inside. One of the Carbon SimSport McLarens is in the gravel on the outside line. Eunice Savalainen running wide there as he challenges for third, but it should be Chris Melbourne in the Bentley. Well, no, Savalainen finds more grip on the exit of the Hugenholtz corner to go wheel to wheel with the Bentley, then up through the dunes now towards the far end of the circuit. These two are still side by side. The next corner is a right-hander though, and that should favour Melbourne, who finally makes third place his own, with Savalainen dropping into fourth place. At the head of the field though, Chaz, it is Malinowski with the lead then. Boothby tried everything to go around the outside at turn one. He just couldn't quite do it.
No, not really. It was very tough. Fantastic commitment, though, from him. Looked like one of the Bentleys got caught up in an incident further back as well. The Lamborghini just took a tap in the rear, and then it got hit in the side. Then it bounced off somebody else, and it was a big chain reaction. And it's almost like a big bowl down there at Tarzan bocht, because there is a lot of camber there that really helps the cars pitch in. But if you're going slowly, then it can be an absolute nightmare. And it's not Sheldon Muscat that gets involved in that, so my mistake. He's done very well indeed to actually get from, I think he was in sort of outside the top 20, wasn't it? No, it was 18th actually, up to 17th. I thought it was a bit further down than that. Mancini's actually got ahead of him as well, and now he's overtaking the Aston. But the important thing up front, Andy, obviously the top two had quite a gap over third place back because of all of that fighting that was going on, as Muscat has to get out of it there. The two Porsches are side by side behind him as well. Everyone going at this early. They're going to absolutely mug the Bentley either side. Or are they? No, not quite.
Yeah, because there's a whopping great concrete wall there on the inside line, which I thought they were going to drive straight into. But this is pretty full-on racing, isn't it? Sheldon Muscat there in the Bentley trying to fend off the Porsche there of Durkop, whilst also attacking Sasha Glatter. Glatter, meanwhile, fired Mancini's Bentley off into the barrier, coming out of the penultimate corner, so I'm fairly certain that we may see a few penalties coming in the near future. The 15-second penalties that you're seeing appearing on your screen at the moment, by the way, they are the solo driver penalties. If you're not sharing your car, then you have to serve an extra 15 seconds in the pit lane. So as efficient as our race stewards are, Chaz, they haven't been applying driving standards penalties just yet, but I think that may well come.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not that sort of hair trigger reflex sort of guys at the moment, but yeah, they are very, very good, and we do really appreciate all the hard work they put in. Now, the top two at the moment, you can see it on the map. The number 992 Porsche is starting to break away from the second-placed McLaren, but you know how quickly that can change. All it takes is one lap to go wrong. But this massive train at the moment, I mean, let's face it, if you're going to choose a vehicle to pull a train, you may as well use a Bentley. But they have a real train behind them, and so does Marco Bischoff here in the very bright Garage 991 powered by a quicker Ferrari. He's got a bunch of Astons chasing him down, and then another Ferrari after that. So it's very much the Brits versus the Italians in terms of the manufacturers are concerned anyway. But right now, this Ferrari looking and sounding absolutely amazing. You've got to love the sound of a Fez. Down into Tarzan box he goes. Keeps it nice and tidy, but the headlights on behind him, that alone is enough to put someone like me off. I'm not sure how these drivers managed to do it. By the way, 285 out of the race.
Yes, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a race that promised much for them, because we mentioned Harry Spears' slightly lacklustre qualifying effort, but they've disconnected, we believe, and that will mean their race is over. So we've lost the Sidemax Motorworks Mercedes, and that unfortunately takes them out of contention. Right, third place battle then makes its way up through Schivlak and out towards the far end of the circuit. This is Bentley, Ferrari, Bentley, Porsche, McLaren, Ferrari, and then a whole host of Aston Martins to round out the top 10, and it's Giuseppe Montalbano in 5th place that we're following here, but he is not that far away from the 3rd and 4th drivers ahead. He's under pressure here though, isn't he? Lars Kisser in the number 15 Porsche, looking round the outside there into the left-hander at turn 10, and then down towards the Hans Ernst box at turn 11 and 12. This is one of the few overtaking opportunities. If you're really feeling brave, you can throw it up the inside, but that inside line is defended by Montalbano. That will slow him down through the middle part though, and you can see the congestion that this causes, Chaz. As soon as one car starts to defend, it delays everybody's momentum, and then the car that's challenging you suddenly has its mirrors filled by another 2 or 3 cars behind.
Yeah, they're going to have to start queuing up and paying 12 quid to enter where the all the real estate behind this Bentley before you know it, otherwise they'll get fined. But yeah, there is some real train action going on here. There's movement in the background as well between two of the Aston Martins. That's Ogorodnikov going one way, then the other, trying to get round James Parker in that 888 machine. Doesn't quite work for him there, tries a cutback. Now, here is a replay from the start. This is what happened to the Lamborghini. We've got the 111 Porsche flying up the inside. He gets a hit from the number 7 McLaren. Then he gets a hit from the Bentley, and then the other Bentley as well, the 99 car. Absolute nightmare there, and that is the aftermath of Ogorodnikov versus Parker.
Yes, so both Aston Martins end up on the grass at Tarzan. Now, we'll get a replay of that, I'm sure, to see what happened, but oh, and then there's another shunt there. Look, that's the 23 car I think I saw in the barriers. So, yes, that makes sense, because Sesha is dropping down the order, so is Offerman in the BMW, so those two have come together. There is Alexander Sesha rejoining in the Volanti Racing Mercedes, right behind the BMW of Offerman, with whom he just tangled. So 2 separate incidents there in the first sector. All of the cars have rejoined, but that will do damage to the cars, which certainly is not going to help their performance moving forward into the next chunk of the race. So already the tight confines of this Zandvoort circuit, Chaz, starting to catch a few of them out.
Yeah, it's really not helping them out here. The Hans Ernst box that you mentioned earlier, which I've cottoned onto the name now. I absolutely love the fact that all these corners are named boxed, basically meaning turn, isn't it? That is a very interesting part of the circuit. You touched on it earlier that if you are feeling brave, you can chuck it up the inside there, but because of how much it slows down, and yes, it's still obviously got chicane-like characteristics where if you're on the inside of one corner, you're then on the outside for the next bit, but it's so slow there, and you've got so much time to compose yourself once you're through the right-hander. It is basically a hairpin through the left. You can focus on your run and then figure out what line you want for the next right. It's one of those really weird corners that is just different to a lot of others in the world, where you can actually really slow it up and you've got a lot of time to pick out your manoeuvre and get it done. So a lot of the drivers will try it down there, I'm sure, this evening. So far we've not seen too much of it, but this is the point of the race where there's a bit of an imbalance. You've got the drivers that know when the field is really close together, they have to absolutely cane it and try and gain every position they can. But then there's a lot of other drivers that know that while it is like that, they need to keep their head and stay level pegging with everybody else. Now, this is what happened into turn 1. Ogrodnikov tries a cutback, bit of a tap. Oh, it just sends him sideways, and then he gets a hit, almost just deserts from the Ferrari behind.
Yes, and he will argue that it was that second hit that knocked him even harder into James Parker, and that's what actually caused the rotation. It was hard to tell from that angle whether that's true, but I'm fairly certain that is the defence that he will present. Oh, out wide there. There's a mistake for Lars Kisser, who sort of re-emerges from out of nowhere, having lost a position to Novakovsky, and about to lose another one here, I think, to Marco Bischoff. No, Bischoff couldn't quite get through, but Lars Kisser dropping out of 6th position down to 7th then, by just outbraking himself going into that Hans-Ernst spot. This is a replay of the second of those incidents that we touched upon then. This was at the back end of the top 10. Sesha here in the Mercedes. Oh, the BMW got a wheel on the grass, I think, didn't it? And then because of that, couldn't slow down for the next corner, and Sesha was completely innocent.
Yeah, that was not the tastiest of moments there. It's Space Pace and Beto Sim Racing DE, that BMW. I love the livery, but you could say that one Beto them in the backside. But we carry on. We move away from my terrible puns, but I mean, Kisser just literally came out of nowhere, entered stage right from the right end of that hairpin then. That was absolutely nuts. He was completely off screen, just suddenly emerged in front of the Ferrari. I'm glad that the Ferrari of Bischoff could see him before we could, because otherwise that could have absolutely ruined both of their races there. But at the end of the day, you don't want to go straight over that hairpin. You at least want to try and make the corner, so at least fair play for him continuing that. But now Bischoff is under pressure from King as well, and it comes back to what you were saying before, where these drivers, they can have a little bit of a side-by-side moment, get compromised slightly by another car, and suddenly you go from attacking to defending.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do make a mistake, finding your gap back in the line isn't always that easy to do either.
Yeah, true.
Leonardo Porco here in the Porsche is in 15th place. He's got Sheldon Muscat ahead. I think Sheldon did pick up a bit of damage in that turn 1 shunt, but you're right, he was lucky not to get fully caught up in it. He's now got the Porsche, though, breathing down his neck. This is 14th and 15th places then at the moment. The 728 car works its way out of that turn 11-12 section into the Kumho box, and then the Ari Leindijk curve onto the final straight, and this is where we get to see the power of that big Bentley just dragging up this hill towards the first corner at Tarzan on board here with Porco, and he just can't get anywhere near the Bentley in a straight line. Good on the brakes is the Porsche, but actually the Bentley is pretty handy when you get to the end of these straights as well. Slightly wide there from Muscat. That Bentley, it's just a difficult car to race against, isn't it? We make jokes all the time about the size of that Bentley, but it really actually does have an effect when it comes to trying to either overtake it or defend from it, because it just fills so much of the track. It's got to be a little bit imposing when you come up against one of them on circuit.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, not even that, but a lot of these supercars that are obviously then made into GT3 cars, they're always low slung. They're always, you know, mid-engine sort of R8s and Ferraris that are all these really gorgeous, low, sleek shapes. The Bentley is not only wide and long, but it's also tall as well. And you've got that humongous wing on top of it that's very thick in itself. You know, it's got a massive curve on it, so humongous end plates. So even trying to look around it to try and make sure you hit your apex while you're chasing it down can be a nightmare in itself. And I've found that people have said the same about the Aston Martin. As we look now, perfectly timed, Mike, thank you very much. Look at the size of the rear wing, how bulky the rear wing is on the Aston Martin. Again, it's got a humongous curve on the plane of it, really chunky sideboards on that thing, and it is actually difficult to see. Even if you just try and peek down the side of the car to see the apex you're trying to hit, it is difficult. But we've got battles going on all over the place here. Kisser down the inside of the McLaren, there is a tap, McLaren goes sideways, and to be fair, Inman actually gets away with that one. That was not Kisser, apologies, that was Durkop, and Durkop would have been saying don't turn in, man, but he actually got away with that there, and they continue. Looks like he's got a really good run on him coming out of the final corner. We've got Parker right behind, recovering from his earlier shunt. But this is actually one of the most interesting parts of the race now, where these little trios, duos, quartets, they all sort of develop out of nowhere. And before you know it, when somebody's progressed from one, they very quickly move on to the next. So they're all just settling into their own rhythms now, and then hopefully they can start putting in their ultimate pace if they're not caught up in battles.
That's definitely the plan for James Parker then, who moves ahead of Florian Durkop there. He also picked up a place at the expense of Igor Ogorodnikov, who came into the pit lane to serve a drive-through penalty, words I seem to recall saying before, for contact with James Parker a few laps ago. So Ogorodnikov, unfortunately, is down in 26th place, but will make a mental note to see if he's still 26th by the end of the race, because knowing Igor as we have sort of come to over recent months, we know that he will either come storming through from 26th to get a top 10 finish by the end, or he won't make the finish at all. So place your bets, everyone, as to which of those two versions of Ogorodnikov we'll see tonight. I'm hoping it's the former, though, because a fight back through the order from Igor could be very entertaining to watch. So too is this fight then for 16th place. Tinko van der Velde recovering from his involvement in that turn 1 shunt. Now the Lamborghini actually doesn't seem to have sustained too much damage. There's been a bit of a hit to the rear by the looks of it, but I think it was mainly time lost by bouncing over the grass. He's got Dominic Pavlis right behind him, and actually Marcel Villa getting away from him, so perhaps all is not quite right with the Lamborghini after all.
I've just noticed that Novakovsky had an incident in the middle sector, and they have now dropped right back down the order in that 1-2-5 McLaren, the Carbon Synsport machine. He went off at the very top of the track map. I noticed that the car had stopped, and he's only just recovered now, and there he is. I'm not sure if he ended up going in the wall, but the car looks to me like it's crabbing a lot. Didn't look like it's behaving itself, so yeah, big damage then. That's an absolute nightmare for them, because they were running inside the top 10 from what I remember. So not a clue what's happened there, and into the pits he goes. Obviously not going to be very pleased with that one, but whether he got help or not is, of course, another story, Andy. But yeah, I just noticed that at the top we obviously had the yellow flag, and then suddenly there was a bright yellow dot on the map, and they had the car stopped there. So really not sure what's happened there, I'm afraid. But either way, it's a real shame.
He's been into the wall, definitely. We'll try and dig out a replay and find out what happened. But yeah, well spotted, Chaz. I hadn't seen that. So Novakovsky then in for repairs, and this will unfortunately put him a lap down, you would imagine. He goes down to last place now, because the 23 there of Sesha, the Mercedes, goes ahead of him, and the next car to come across the start-finish line will be Maciej Malinowski, the race leader, who does come through now then to put him a lap down. We're getting a penalty, a drive-through penalty this is for the 69 BMW. Again, not the most shocking piece of news we'll get all day. Bastian Offerman for his involvement in the contact with Sesha up at the Hugenholtz, and so he will be the second driver then to incur the wrath of the race stewards, who thankfully haven't had too many incidents so far to deal with, and the ones they have had, Chaz, have been pretty much slam dunk penalties, really, haven't they?
Yeah. There's not been much argument, I'd imagine, from the decisions made. But as we said about the top of the broadcast, track position is so important here. You really have to fight for it and go down the inside. So this is what happened to the 1-2-5 McLarens. This is the start of the lap, turn 1, and there's something wrong. There's something wrong steering wise there. Maybe a hardware issue, software issue for Novakovsky, but that car isn't behaving itself, I should say, and I've got a horrible feeling now that he's going to get up to speed down here, it's going to wiggle one way and then the other, and he's either going to get collected by somebody else, or it's just going to spit itself at the scenery. Either way, it's not going to be pretty. Oh,
yeah, there it goes, yeah. Off and bang. So what could be causing that then, Chaz? Oh, and there's second impact, which I think probably did even more damage. I'm a relative newbie to sim racing, and my kit has never let me down. So what could have happened then to have caused that? Because that's not driver error, is it?
No, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, I'm not sure if he had any contact before that damaged the car, but I've never seen it sort of cause it to that extent. Now, I've had issues previously with sim racing hardware where it will very quickly sort of disconnect and reconnect from like a USB hub or something like that, and anyone that's got a sim racing wheel will know that usually your wheel does a sort of full rotation one way then the other to sort of reset itself and then center it. But sometimes when it quickly disconnects and reconnects, based on where you last had your inputs, it sometimes picks that up as the center, and basically it'll mean that it's off center, or you've got more input one way than the other, and you have to sort of counterbalance that. But if I'm honest, I would have expected someone of Novakovsky's talent to be able to sort of figure out where centre is and just put a little left or right. So I'm not sure if it was something different, but my initial guess would be that. But well, in typical commentary fashion, I figure I'm wrong.
I've found as a commentator it's always easier to assume that and then be pleased if someone proves you otherwise.
Exactly.
How often this happens, though, isn't it? I saw in the YouTube comment section earlier on, I'm pretty sure it was Malinowski who had a pedal disconnection in a race less than 24 hours ago. So it can happen. And when it does, you are completely out of control. I mean, it's like driving a real car and suddenly the steering wheel comes off in your hand. You know, there is nothing you can do then to control the car, and it must be just the most helpless feeling. What this means then is that the Carbon SimSport hopes now pretty much solely rest on the shoulders of the number 7 car, which is running in 17th place at the moment. Tinko van der Velde ahead, but Pavlos is one of these drivers with a 15-second penalty for being a solo driver. So he needs to try and clear this Lamborghini quickly, doesn't he, in order to get some clean air and build a gap, because he knows that his pit stop is going to be that bit longer than everybody else's.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him, because sometimes it can be a bit of a blessing, because you can all of a sudden get dropped back by that penalty into a bit of clear air, get into more of a rhythm latter in the latter stages of the race. But obviously you have another car or two to overtake if you were battling with them. Now, Michael Hamlet's just jumped up and down with joy and probably thrown his headset across the room in excitement, because apparently there's rain in 30 minutes. So it's going to get very, very interesting, and it's going to be near the pit window. Oh, no! Velda's around again. Oh, Damien Pavlos absolutely piles into the back of him, and Tinko van der Velde is going to be a very unhappy boy right now. And, well, they may as well rename the team to Sideways Motorworks. Oh, hello, there's a housing estate parked in the way. What on earth happened? That's Mancini, is it not?
Yes, I think it is. That was very random. It is Flavio Mancini. I'm not entirely sure how he got the Racing Point car pointing the wrong way there out of Tarzan, but I presume with a little bit of assistance, in much the same way that Tinko van der Velde found himself in the gravel at turn 1. That was a bit of a clumsy move, you'd have to say. Not even a move, really, from Paulus. He just ran into the back of the Lamborghini heading through turn 1. But that has been the trouble spot, because it is the best place to try and overtake around the Zandvoort circuit, really. Mancini, I think, is feeling the car out for damage, so that tells me he's been in the barriers as well. The car looks like it might be crabbing a little bit, so turning into a bit of a race of attrition, this, isn't it? And this is before the rain arrives, which, as you started to say, is due in about 30 minutes, which is pretty much exactly when the pit window will close. And if that is the case, it's going to give the team such a giant headache, isn't it? Because a lot of them will want to pit early, try and get themselves out of traffic, get an undercut maybe on the cars around them. But if they think rain could be on the way in 5 minutes' time, they're going to want to wait as late into that pit window as they can. And then, of course, if it doesn't rain until after the pit window is closed, they'll all have to make a second pit stop anyway. This could get very, very interesting.
Now, one of the absolute blessings about having weather conditions change around a pit window is that the second driver getting in the car, if they get in as it's sort of getting to its worst conditions, they won't have known any different as the race had gone on, so they won't have had to adapt to that. They'll just go straight out and they will see how the conditions are, and they just start from a blank slate. That can also be a bit of an advantage to them sometimes. The ones I feel sorry for are the drivers, such as Robin Aitos that we're looking at right now, that are the individual drivers, the ones doing this on their own, because they have to adapt the whole race long to conditions like that, even if there's a pit window thrown in there in the middle. So they may as well just pit when they pit and just deal with what the weather throws at them, if I'm honest with you, because it could be so difficult doing this on your own with conditions as changeable as this. So we've just got to keep our fingers crossed for a lot of them now and, well, see what happens. That's pretty much the long and short of it. But this is going to be an absolutely amazing encounter either way. Let's just see what the guys at the front can hold on to as well, because you never know how quickly people can rise up the order and how quickly they can fall down.
Well, and it's these kind of things that can really turn a race and a championship on their head, because imagine if the Random Pasta Bowl team go the wrong way on strategy, if they decide to pit early and then they have to make an extra stop, or vice versa, and that could lose them not just 1 or 2 positions, it could lose them, 15 or 16 potentially if it all goes wrong. It also depends, of course, a little bit on how heavy this rain is. If it's a little shower, or if it's a gradual transition from dry to wet, then that's a little bit easier to manage than if the heavens completely open and the circuit gets flooded within a couple of laps. So Right, watch this space then. We are still not even half an hour into this race, and as we wait for the rain to maybe arrive, we've got some battling going on track here, because Jonas Savalainen and Giuseppe Montalbano have both moved ahead of Chris Melbourne here, haven't they, into 3rd and 4th places, and Montalbano looks racy. He really needs to try and get onto terms with Malinowski and Boothby if he can, but they are that 2 or 3 seconds up the road. You can just see the orange McLaren there of Boothby. That's almost a 3-second gap now between Boothby 2nd and Savalainen 3rd. So if Montalbano does feel that he's quicker than the Ferrari, this is a move that he needs to really get on with, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. He can't dawdle around here and just follow him and take the time to assess your sort of competitors' mistakes, or sort of just assess where you're quicker than them, where your car or even you as a driver have the advantage. You'll see a lot of the drivers doing that in usual circumstances, but now, like you say, he does have to, well, crack on, as we say here in the UK. Someone else that's doing that right now is James Parker in the 888 Aston Martin. He has another one of those beautiful machines in front of him, with Aetos at the wheel, the 166 car. Fantastic livery on the Beto Sim Racing DE machines as well. See, we saw the number 69 BMW before. Unfortunately, it was buried in the back of a Mercedes, but still, very pretty car while it was doing that. I'm actually genuinely gutted to see the M6 being phased out soon for the god-awful M4 GT3. But still, look at the run that Parker's got here on Aetos. But look, as soon as he pulls out of the slipstream, though, he's not really got that much in a straight line. A little bit of movement about there down the straight as the connections sort of restore them to where they are. Parker keeps his nose down the inside. Nice space given by Ryan, and he decides to concede. Or, I'm not sure if he decided to concede there or got the back end a little bit squirrely. It seemed to be slightly out of shape, but even still, Parker, nice and clean, through he goes.
Indeed, and he moves the car that is 4th in the championship up into 17th in the race. And the trouble for the hilariously named FFS Sendipu's team is they've already had a bad race. They were 21st back at Misano at the start of the year. Since then, though, they've been really strong. 6th at Kyalami, 5th at Bathurst, and the first podium with a 2nd place finish the Nürburgring 2 weeks ago. So they were actually 4th in the points, only 58 points off the championship lead coming into this race, but obviously that may well change unless they can make a bit more progress. And again, the rain that is coming might well play into the Aston Martin's hands. Up through the right-hander at turn number 9, and into turn 10 goes Josh Inman, then 20th place for him. He's got Florian Durkop just ahead of him in the number 19 Porsche, but things just calming down a little bit, at least deeper into the field, as a number of them have fallen by the wayside already, lots of them getting these penalties. Ogorodnikov, one of those, who you can see is up to 23rd place now. And this is the period of the race, isn't it, Chaz, where they just need to try and settle into a little bit of a rhythm. But I'm sure that there are lots of conversations about strategy going on now between the team and driver, because they'll all be chatting away to each other, won't they, and deciding what they need to do in about 15 minutes time or so as we inch closer and closer towards that pit window.
And the thing is, a lot of them are going to have to take a risk. There's always an element of risk in something like this, especially with pit stops as well, and figuring out strategy and what you have to do. But you never know how bad the rain's going to be. It might not be that bad, but I really wouldn't like to be one of the engineers or one of the guys really with the brains of the operation right now behind the scenes, because this could get so spicy indeed. And like you say, some of the cars are really going to absolutely thrive in wet conditions if it gets wet enough. That's the thing, because we were speaking about the Aston Martins earlier on at the start of the show, and you know they'll do well in the I almost said the ret as well after that. The ret and the wane, the rain and in the wet. As hello, big drifty poos there from Side Max Motorworks. It's just about making sure there's the right level of rain for an Aston Martin. It's a very fragile little thing, but you don't want to completely flood the circuit, because then some of the cars have a level playing field. What a move that was, down the inside by Ogorodnikov. Lovely stuff. Oh no! Tinko van der... Oh, this flipping Lamborghini. What is happening, man? It's actually frustrating. Like, I feel so sorry for them. I'm not sure if he got a tap there off Ogorodnikov or whether... I hate to sort of point this out to him as a bit of a moment, but it looked like Tinko van der Velde sort of saw Ogorodnikov move to the left, and he sort of just went to take the mick out of him a little bit and just moved very quickly one way or the other and say, look, I can do it as well. And then he just flicked the car off the road, because I've seen people do it, and I think, if I'm honest, that's what he did. He won't admit it, but...
Well, no, I've seen very much the same thing myself, but that was odd. It was almost like he thought maybe he could sort of jinked back up the inside or something and lost the rear. Because it is, mid-engine cars, especially the Lamborghini, they can be a bit twitchy, can't they? And sudden movements on the wheel don't tend to make it happy. And then from that point, he was on the grass, and honestly, there wasn't much hope for him. So that's unfortunately going to drop them a lot further down the order. They were battling there with the number 7 Carbon SimSport car. Remember, their teammate car, the 125, had that really weird issue before where something seemed to break and the car sort of speared off into the barriers on a couple of occasions. Well, we've seen our message in the YouTube chat. Thank you very much for letting us know it was a wheel issue. The wheel just stopped working, and that is quite a fundamental item when it comes to trying to direct the car in the direction you want it to go. Ooh. You see, I was hoping, Chaz, that the replay might have cleared this up, but actually I'm more confused than ever because I don't think he was trying to get up the inside, was he?
No, like I say, I think he was just trying to dummy him and just say, look, I can jink about as well, watch this. And then it's just gone so wrong. But as Michael mentioned in the background just then, that car, as soon as you get a little bit of rear damage on it and you lose any sort of balance at the back of it, and you mentioned how twitchy those cars can be anyway, as soon as you lose any of that sort of stability, it's almost undrivable. They're so difficult. I've driven the Audi R8 quite a lot. I love the car. It sounds and looks amazing, but my God, is it a pig sometimes. And it's the same with a lot of mid to rear engine cars as well. The flashing of the lights there from Ogorodnikov, flamboyant as ever. Now here we go. Thank you, Mike Yao, for getting us this. So let's have a look. He suddenly goes left, right. Yeah. I honestly don't have a clue because there was nowhere to go. He couldn't get down the inside, even if he wanted to pretend that he could. But I honestly think that he just wanted to sort of scare him into it, as we've got someone kicking up a lot of dust on the outside of the circuit there. Who's that?
Was that Savalainen? I think
it might have been, yeah. It looks like
he's dropped back, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. Yes, there he is. Oh, no.
So that has championship implications as well. So Jonas Savalainen from 3rd drops down to 5th position. Then Montalbano goes through into 3rd. Chris Melbourne gets the next of the Bentleys up to 4th. And Jonas Savalainen makes another mistake, and we saw him making a couple of them last time at the Nürburgring as well. Well, was it a mistake, or was he given some assistance maybe by the GT Omega Omega G Performance Bentley, I should say, which is now into 3rd place in the race, a position that matches its championship position as well. Now that 340 car, again, we'll dig out the replay when we can, but Savalainen at the very least has dirt on his tyres, and he's now got Lars Kisser and Marco Bischoff right behind him. So Savalainen needs to try and regroup here. Still over an hour of this race to go, and it could have been worse. He didn't appear to hit the barriers, he doesn't seem to have any damage on the car, and he's still in this lead train as Kisser tries now to fend off Marco Bischoff, who had a look going through Tarzan. He takes a wider line now into the Hugenholtz and tries to carry the momentum up the hill, but that was good placement of the car there from Lars Kisser. Just held the car on the apex a fraction longer than normal to prevent that switchback, that momentum that was coming from the 991 car. We ride on board with now over the top of the hill. Is there a gap on the inside? Not really, not from that far back. And so Lars Kisser fends him off for now. Good racing, this.
Yeah, really good stuff. And it's one thing to defend the inside line on the way into a corner, but to sort of have the awareness and, to be fair, to have the capability to then defend any sort of cutback as well, park it on the apex. It's really wily racing. It's great to watch it when you have two people just trying to outsmart each other on track. Different cars, very different cars indeed, but very close in terms of performance, really close in terms of their levels of talent as well with the two drivers and their outright pace. It's amazing to see. Got the 101 car, Czarnecki lighting up the yellow flags at the moment. Looks like he's out of the way. This is what happened to Savalainen up over the crest. A very, very difficult part of the circuit. This is going to be going through. I reckon it'll be the double apex right-hander in just a moment. A lot of these drivers are getting very close to the grass, and I think all it's going to take here is a tiny touch of it on the way in. Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe just through this bit here. Yep, there it is. And it just drags you out wide. It's like someone's put a magnet on the wall. Luckily, he doesn't get too drawn in by said magnet, but it's such a difficult bit of the circuit to then get back on without losing even more and more time. And look now, position change, Bischoff up into 6th.
Yes, he's ahead of Lars Kisser's Porsche then, and now Lars has got Darren King right behind him. Though Kisser starting to struggle a bit. We've got the 101 Ferrari off there on the inside of the Hugenholtz. Not entirely sure what that was all about. That's been there a while, actually. That's the car being driven by Artur Czarnecki. And I've noticed that car on the circuit map has been stationary at that position for a good minute or so, actually, now. So I don't know whether this is a car that simply won't move, but there is an option, isn't there, to sort of fast-track the car back to the garage. So hopefully it won't stay there for the duration of the race, because that will mean the yellow flag stay there for the duration, and in fact it has now disappeared, so the 101 car is out of the way. You're right though, Marco Bischoff moving forward, and that means that he now chases down the similar car of Jonas Savalainen just up the road. Kisser though seems to be fading a bit, doesn't he, now, as we move into the second half of this opening stint, and he's got Darren King in that Aston Martin breathing down his neck. Now, where is the Aston going to be quicker than the Porsche? Straight line, potentially, and maybe under braking as well. You can really sort of send that Aston Martin off into the corners quite quickly, can't you? He's got a really good front end, and that might just help Darren potentially open up an overtaking opportunity into this first corner. I'm not convinced, though, that he's quite close enough.
Yeah, it's little by little, I think, at the moment, isn't it? They just have to be so patient, because it's so difficult when you are chasing another car, but you're only catching them a tiny bit at a time. It's so difficult to make sure that you keep a level head. It's really strange that some of these drivers, they are very happy to just take the odd tenth out of people here and there. I'm so impatient whenever I'm racing. If I'm not taking half a second a lap out of people, I'm really annoyed, and then I'll push the car too hard, and then I'll make a mistake, and I'll be taking half a second out myself because I'll hit something. But to be honest, these guys show some real strong perseverance and patience in these parts of these races. They're at latter stages of their stints. They've got still a long time left to go in the race. And now, as it's been brought to our attention, the rain has now been pushed back in terms of how long, but it's increased in severity.
Interesting. Okay, so
proper rain, apparently.
Proper that wet stuff, you mean?
Yeah, British rain.
Yes. Well, that is because it's been pushed back a bit later, though. That probably makes this a little bit more simple, doesn't it, for the teams, because they're going to have to just pit during the pit window regardless, and then accept the fact that there might be a second pit stop a little bit later on, but then it's still about timing that pit stop so that you don't come too early and you don't leave it too late and get stuck on a really slippery circuit. So I think the second half of this race is going to be especially entertaining, isn't it, if that weather does make an appearance. We haven't had a wet race this season. We had a wet qualifying session back at Kyle Army, and then the rain sort of mysteriously disappeared by the time we got into the race. Now, the front of the field, Malinowski still leads the way, but that orange McLaren of George Boothby is getting a little bit closer, isn't it? There's traffic up the road as well for Malinowski, so Random Pastable are not just running away with it here in the same way that they did 2 weeks ago, are they?
Yeah, that's it. That McLaren, bright orange in its very subtle form, really filling the mirrors at the moment. And to be honest, if you wanted to choose the colour of your car, then they've done a good job to make sure that 992 Porsche is very aware that they are there. They are not disappearing at all right now. And getting up to some lap traffic as well, Malinowski needs to just keep his head, make sure that he gets through nice and smoothly. Got Mercedes just in front of him there, I believe the number 23 machine of Sesha. Gets a flash of the lights, moves out of the way very nicely indeed. Now, is he going to be on the exit of the corner for the McLaren? No, he's not in a way where he's going to hold him up now. So the main tipping point now could be if just one car holds up one of these guys more than the other, because when you're going through traffic, it is one of the most frustrating things in the world. Not that I've ever lapped anybody, but it's so frustrating when you go through traffic and you see maybe your rival or championship rival, race competitor, whatever, get through it absolutely easy, piece of cake, no worries, no change to your racing line, no compromise. But then you have to sort of slow it down on an apex not to hit the back of somebody, and you get held up, or vice versa. If someone's behind you and you see them suddenly closing on you because they got past traffic easier than you, it's such a difficult position to be in, and all it does is wind you up and frustrate you, and then that sort of changes how you're driving. Then there's a lot of mental games in lap traffic that people often forget until they're in that situation.
It only takes the slightest of miscommunications with a back marker and you can lose a huge chunk of time. If you think that they're going to get out of the way and then they don't, or you think they're going to stick to the racing line perhaps and then they don't, you end up sort of having to slam on the brakes to avoid them, especially at a circuit like this one, because there aren't that many places where you can just open the door to the faster car and wave them through. You almost always end up sort of peering on the racing line in front of them, and then you have to go offline to pass them onto the dirty side of the racetrack. So George Boothby is closing in again here, isn't he? He looks quicker at this stage of the race than Malinowski, and maybe Magic just trying to take things a little bit easier maybe through the traffic as well, but Boothby's McLaren working well through that middle sector. He's got the gap down now probably to less than it's been at any point in this race, because even at the end of lap 1, Malinowski had about a 3/4 of a second or so lead, and now it is coming down by the corner. On board meanwhile with Jonas Savalainen, who's behind Chris Melbourne. He also, we're being told, had an off-track excursion earlier on. We spotted that he dropped third to what was 5th at the time, but it was a mistake. He ran wide onto the grass, possibly in a very similar vein to what Savalainen did, and now the two of them find themselves scrapping over 4th place.
Yeah, that's it. Just another tiny story in how this race develops. You know, drivers just losing the opposition here or there could slot them into a battle that could hold them up, and then mean that after the pit stops they come out in a different position, different traffic around them, you know, no clean air to be able to put fast laps in. It's just the tiny moments like that that can amplify over the course of a race like this. We still have 53 minutes left to go, which is a long time really to be lapping Zandvoort. It really is a track that takes so much concentration, so much precision, especially when you're trying to race the other drivers around you and gain position, as well as a big slide there by Lars Kisser going through the left-hander. Another difficult bit to get right because of the camber through there, but it's held up Darren King on the exit. So Darren not able to stick right with him. And again, it's one of those pinch points, isn't it really, Andy? There's a few of them around this circuit where if you are chasing somebody, you need to get a very good run and get quite lucky with how quickly you catch them out of a corner. Speaking about catching them out of a corner though, George Boothby now right with the race leader Malinowski.
Yeah, he has definitely got a good run, but you're right, has to time this move right now. It's all well and good being a couple of tenths of a second a lap quicker than the car ahead, but if you're not quicker than them through the key overtaking opportunities, then it's not going to be an easy job to actually get past them. So George Boothby, having caught Malinowski, is now running in the dirty air, of course. That will be reducing his downforce level slightly through some of the faster corners, and that just makes it that bit harder to build that momentum, that impetus that you need to actually make the overtake stick. Out of the final corner they come, then down the pit straight. The McLaren is usually pretty handy in a straight line, so George Boothby looks to try and close in, but it's just not really a long enough drag, is it? Down to Tarzan, late on the brakes, into the banked corner. Who's got the neater line? They're both absolutely inch perfect through there. Boothby maybe a bit wide actually on the exit, so Malinowski comes off the right-hander quickly and heads up onto another lap. Then we have 24 laps in the book. We are inching towards the pit window. We've got drizzle 10 minutes away apparently, so it could still start raining, couldn't it, during that pit window? And if it does, but it's not quite wet enough for wet tyres yet, I guarantee we'll see some of the teams with a bit less to lose, Chaz, sticking those wets on anyway. If they know the rain is coming, you don't mind losing a couple of seconds for a few laps being stuck on the wrong tyres if you know that the weather is then going to come to you a few minutes further down the line. This is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, this is going to be amazing. It's sideways because Malinowski clips the grass a little bit there. That's the moment that we saw but earlier for Savalainen. And Malinowski somehow makes the save. That was incredibly sideways in that Porsche. But like you say, it all builds up, and Boothby now, he's pushing hard. He feels a weakness in Malinowski. He sees that chink in the armour, but then in just trying to take advantage of that, he's pushed too hard on the exit there, carried too much speed. Now, what's that going to do for the tyres on that McLaren? He's obviously going to have scrubbed them off quite nicely already, but even still, for the following corner or so, when you've got a bit of grass, change the temperature of them, you can feel a little bit unsettled. We've got yellow flags out somewhere on the circuit. Can't quite see the track map from this point, but seems like we're all right. But now we see Savalainen, I should say, on the back of Melbourne in the Bentley, trying to recover after I should say, his earlier issue. And now the pit window is open, Andy. So this now is where we're going to see the calls from a lot of these teams. Michael Hamlet himself in the background. What do you do? Are the words from Michael. He doesn't have a clue. Out of them lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, whichever way you go, you have to fully commit to it, I think. If it's going to rain, if it's definitely going to rain, I think you have to wait until the very end of the pit window, because you don't want to have to make an extra pit stop. An extra pit stop could lose you over half a minute, so you need to try and leave this pit stop as late as you possibly can, And then if it's already raining, go on to wets, or if you're fairly confident the rain's only a minute or two away, go on to wets then. But anyone that pits early will have to go on to slick tyres, because at the moment it is still dry. Sasha Glatter is in. Now, he has a 15-second solo driver penalty to serve as well. I would be fascinated to know what tyres he's going on to. Again, I suspect it has to be the slicks, because you can only really do what the weather is doing right now. You can only react to that. It's not raining yet, and if you go out there now on wet tyres and it doesn't rain for another 10 or 15 minutes, Chaz, those wet tyres will be useless by the time the rain actually does get here.
Yeah, that's it. They're so sensitive to temperature, wet tyres, especially when it's not raining. When you're not working them and keeping them cool, you can overheat them a lot easier, wear down a lot of the tread on them, and then before you know it, you may as well be on slicks anyway in the wet, because they are absolutely, as you said, useless. So, interesting calls to pit this early, if you ask me. But it's drivers taking a risk. You always see this. You have drivers rolling the dice. Melbourne is doing that now in the number 70 Bentley, so he's coming in early. But a lot of people in the chat are already saying, don't rain for the Bentley's sake. I think maybe he's worried about that. He's thinking, right, we need to just get the pit stop done and then adapt from there. So some of them, they just have to go for it early doors. But I think you're right. You leave it as late as possible. Give yourself longer to adapt to what the weather's doing and then pit and react to it later on. But there's no knowing. There's no knowing. But I think you're right, simple as.
Say that again. Can I have that in writing, please? Not something I hear that often.
I'll get my feather quill out.
Well, this is getting into the crunch part of the race then. This is when the race will be won or lost, potentially. We've still got it really close on the track as well, haven't we? Malinowski and Boothby nose to tail here. Savalainen also stuck behind the back marker there. Of course, he's been released now that Chris Melbourne has pitted, so the last thing Eunice wants is traffic ahead of him, but that's exactly what he's got as he heads down to the Hans Ernst box, which is where the leaders already are then. Out of the tight left-hander, 2 more corners to go on this lap. I really don't think either of these two are going to come into the pit lane this time. In the background, by the way, you can see Giuseppe Montalbano there in 3rd position, so he's still some way back and hasn't really been able to lap quite as quickly as the race leader over the last few laps either, so the gap between 2nd and 3rd is not coming down. There is Darren King in 7th place, stuck behind Lars Kisser's Porsche once again, which runs a bit wide actually, going through the Kumo block there into turn number 14. Crucial that you get a good exit from here, down the pit straight. Now the Aston Martin might just be close enough to have a go here. Lars Kisser certainly thinks it might be, because he moves over to the middle of the road to partially defend, then reclaims the racing line. That's all the invitation that King needs, but he's not late enough on the brakes. Couldn't quite get the big Aston Martin stopped, and so Lars Kisser hangs on to that 6th spot for now. Good stuff.
Yeah, nice moment there. It looked like he was just going to stick his nose down the inside that tiny bit more, just to scare Lars into sort of letting off the brakes a bit and leaving a bit more room just in case there was contact. You see a lot of drivers trying that, and they just do poke their nose in to get a reaction. That's basically all they're doing. Get the other driver to adapt, change their racing line, put them off, and then nip down the inside and take the place. But this is good pressure so far from Darren King, but Lars Kisser doing a great job of absorbing said pressure at the minute. The two of them switching one way then the other. It's so great to watch GT3 cars racing around Zandvoort with the weight transfer. Look how close Darren King was to the grass there, literally riding the white line all the way around the right-hander into turn 9, then at the hairpin at turn 10 where they are now. That is absolute precision. And I mean, you see a lot of these drivers clipping the grass the odd little bit here and there, but a number of them are so amazing at sticking to the white line, and that's why they are some of the very best on the SimGrid, isn't it?
No, absolutely, and it takes such precision to go quickly around here, because it's a full commitment circuit and you have to use every single inch of it to carry that speed through the corners. But if you do make a mistake and you misjudge it even by an inch, then you get a wheel on the grass, as you said, and then you are going to go off the road fairly spectacularly. On board with George Boothby then in 2nd position. So important for UKOG 47 to try and beat the random past the ball Porsche ahead of them, to try and close in the gap in the championship. Then they make their way through the left-hander then at the Hugenholtz, out onto the high-speed part of the circuit. 28 championship points separate these two, remember, coming into this race. Now, if you win the race, you score 50 points. If you're second, you score 42. So there is a chance to get at least 8 of those points back here if George Boothby can get himself ahead of the Porsche and then stay there for another 44.5 minutes, which certainly isn't going to be easy to do. But at this stage of the race, he is in the quicker car. He has time and time again been able to close in onto the rear bumper of the Porsche, but not yet, Chaz. really been able to show his nose. Is he waiting for the pit stop? Is he waiting for the weather? Or does he just not have the speed where it matters to make the move?
I think at the moment it's a bit of that, but also a bit of waiting and assessing where the McLaren has its strengths and weaknesses, where there is an obvious difference between the McLaren and the Porsche, between George and between Majaj. And to be honest, it doesn't look to me like there is much of a difference at the moment. All I'd say that is keeping them together is a slight bit of better sort of apex speed from the McLaren, and of course the slipstream. But look at that there, clips the gravel a little bit, goes over the curb on the exit of the penultimate corner, loses a good half a car length there, but then he's going to get it back. Now we see rain coming out of the sky here at Zandvoort, so things are about to get very interesting indeed. Definite raindrops, windscreen wipers going on, and all of a sudden these drivers are now going to have to adapt so quickly to what is going on around them. And I feel like Boothby, all of a sudden, look at him, he's seen the rain, he's thought, right, go time, let's get on with it. And all of a sudden that body language of the McLaren has changed, and importantly the body language of the Porsche has changed. That looks suddenly very twitchy.
Yeah, that was instantaneous, wasn't it, as well? As soon as the first drops of moisture fell from the sky, they both started sliding around. And, of course, Malinowski is the pioneer. He's the first to discover exactly how slippery it is. Boothby has at least a fraction of a second to react to what the Porsche does ahead, and that, I think, is why he had a bit more confidence. Savalainen has boxed, by the way. Felix Rupert is in as well. Sheldon Muscat is in. They're going to try and get the jump on these now and get onto those wet tyres at the first possible opportunity. We still have over 2.5 minutes worth of the pit window to go, and there is the number 11 car heading back out onto the circuit then. So Savalainen is out of that car now, and the number 11 taken over for the second stint by Jesse Kauppinen, and the timing screen will update with that in a moment or two. So they will rejoin, you have to assume, on wet tyres now, because we believe that this rain is here to stay. And will they be able now to get to speed as quickly as possible and use this extra lap on the correct tyres to try and gain some time? We expect the race leaders then to come in this time surely, although they both sort of managed to pick up the pace a bit in the second half of the lap. Out of the final corner, they both hang to the right though, so they are both heading into the pit lane, and this now, Chaz, is where the pit lane will get very busy indeed, and George Boothby so nearly skates into the back of Malinowski as they headed into the pit lane. That was close.
He really wanted to get a look at what Porsche have done with the exhaust on the back of that car, didn't he? Flipping out. That was unbelievable. Really close there. I absolutely love that from Boothby, right on the limit. Fair play, sunshine. And it's another great thing as well in Assetto Corsa Competizione that we get the sort of designation of the condition of the track. You know, it says up there right now that it is greasy. So basically it means now that from it being optimum, from it being grippy and dry and all lovely, it is now in a greasy condition. So it is instantly changed as the rain has come out. And here is the number 11 machine. There's a Bentley having a bit of a moment in front of them there.
Yeah, that's was the Volanti
70
racing car, wasn't it, I think, which has been pitted now. So that's actually the lead car that stopped, isn't it? The number 70, which Chris Melbourne was in. Out goes the 992. Where is the McLaren? It's ahead. The McLaren has jumped them in the pit lane. UKO G47 jumped Random Pastable in the pit lane by quite some margin. Look at the gap that they've got. That is a really slick pit stop then, and back out into the fray goes the 47 car, and that now could be really significant. Jesse Kauppinen here is still battling away with the number 70 Bentley. You've got the Ferrari, which I think has just rejoined for the pit lane as well, but an effort that was from the 47 squad. The amount of time that you can gain from a really slick pit stop, well, that was a really graphic indication of it, and that might just have won them the race.
That was incredible. I can't believe how much of a difference that made. They've got multiple seconds in hand now, and if I'm honest, Cody Pride is going to have to race for the pride of taking this victory back, because as we were speaking about earlier, Cody has pressure on him here. You know, we've had a 3-time race winner aboard this car anyway, and now, of course, with Tauscher not being here, Cody has had to take over with all of the weight on his shoulders. Niels van der Kokel in that McLaren, we know how fast he is. He's another driver that really doesn't need any introduction to anyone watching on the SimGrid. The Bentley getting sideways there on the exit of the corner. Kauppinen gets a really good run on the left-hand side. If he hangs this around the outside here, which you'd have to be a little bit bonkers to do, he's going to be on the inside for the second part, but no, he thinks better of it. A lot of them are still going to get used to the conditions here and play it safely around these first few laps. while it does get wetter and wetter out there. Look at this. He's still putting his nose down the inside, still piling the pressure on, because if you can force somebody into a mistake, it's more likely they're going to make it in conditions like this. The track is officially now damp, and the rain is going to continue to increase. And is that the 70 going into the pits? It is. Interesting.
Now, were they on slicks? Do you think
that's what
they pitted early, didn't they? I think they were on slick tyres.
Yeah.
So, well, we kind of said that probably wasn't the right thing to do, and they tried to roll the dice. It did not work, so that takes them out of contention then, you'd have to say, for a really strong result. It frees up Jesse Kauppinen then. Everybody has now stopped at least once. They've got their mandatory pit stop out of the way. You are, of course, still entitled to pit again, though, if you need to, either for repairs or to change your tyres in the second part of the race, as long as you make one stop during that 10-minute pit window, which has now closed. So the new order then, Niels van der Kerkelt, the local man who lives really not that far away from the Zandvoort circuit in real life, he leads the way. There he is. The UKOG 47 car was 2.8 seconds clear of Cody Pride at the start of the lap, at the end of their outlap essentially. There is Cody in second place. He's got a Bentley right behind him, which is not the one that he's fighting for position though, because he's actually about 6 or 7 seconds ahead of the Karim Matea Bentley. There it is in third position. The Omega G Performance car, which is third in the championship, still running third in the race. Then it's the 991, that's the Ferrari of Jonas van Druyten, which is running really strongly now, having been sort of in and around the back end of the top 10 all race. They've found themselves in fourth position after the pit stops. Fifth place is Jesse Kauppinen, that's the car that Jonas Savalainen was in, so they were pretty quick, weren't they, to come into the pit lane, but they didn't seem to benefit quite as much from it as you might have expected. Fifth place for them at the moment. In sixth place, another Porsche, that's Nicholas Huben in the number 15 car. Seventh place is Max Vollmuth's Aston Martin. Eighth, Oliver Seitz was eighth, but of course that number 70 car has just pitted for a second time, so Jan Willem van Ommen will jump up into the 8th spot. Ninth place will go to Daniel Amhoff's Porsche, and Leonardo Porco will jump into the top 10 as well. There he is, look, in the 728 car, another one of those single drivers as well. So Chaz, he's done well, hasn't he, to be in the top 10 after serving an extra 15 seconds in the stops.
Yeah, that's brilliant stuff. He'll be really, really pleased with himself for that one. And, you know, you have to give a lot of respect to the drivers that do this on their own. I mean, a lot of people would potentially argue that, you know, when you come to a 24-hour or even 12-hour race, you know, people do 3-4 hours at a time. But, you know, when it's in a series that is based around 90-minute races, to do one on your own when you have the availability to have a driver change, fair play to them. You know, they're giving it what they've got. They've got a penalty to deal with, and they've accepted that, and they've gone for it. Interesting as well, obviously, Cody Pride doing a fantastic job already, but needs to go chasing after your race leader. His dad and granddad are watching in the chat. Darren Pride putting a message in there to say, come on, Cody. So he's definitely got the support. And Alan Ismay saying the Pride tribe is here to support Cody. You can do it. So he's certainly got the support behind him. Whether that can will him on enough to go and get that lead back in that Porsche, we will have to wait and see. But, I mean, you can see from the body language of these cars that these things are now moving around a lot more as Ben Walker, to be honest, rather than walking into that corner, more skis on his way into it. But these things have got so much more body language about them now, and you've got to think that if the mid-engine cars weren't difficult before, now they're going to be even more of a nightmare.
Yeah, and the McLaren in particular, certainly the real version of the McLaren 720S is a bit lethal in the wet conditions. Certainly a lot of the amateur drivers that jump into these cars do not enjoy driving it in the wet. It's something that James Baldwin, who I'm sure will be familiar to many of our viewers here tonight, said that he found when he, of course, raced very successfully in the British GT Championship last year. As soon as the heavens opened, that McLaren became a real handful. He used to say that the accelerator basically became an on-off switch, and you just never could quite get out of the corners as smoothly as you would like. So that car then might now start to struggle for pace, and of course that doesn't bode well for Niels van der Kerkelt, because he is, of course, in a McLaren leading the way, and on the previous lap was 0.3 slower than Cody Pride in second. So the gap is down to 2.6 seconds now. So Cody seems to have acclimatised a little bit more quickly to these conditions, and the Porsche may be a bit manageable in this weather as well. They've got a good gap over third place too, so Cody Pride is really throwing everything he's got at this.
Yeah, he's doing a fantastic job so far, even if it's just chipping away. You know what I was saying earlier, these drivers are sometimes very happy to just take 1/10 of a second out of somebody a lap every single lap. It doesn't matter if it's 1/10 or 1,000th, as long as you're quicker than them, you can continue to have the confidence and continue to push. It doesn't have to be a massive margin each time. There's an update to your current standings, and Random Pasta Bowl would have a very handsome lead in the championship still, but it would have been chipped away at by UKOG 47. Omega E-Racing Team would still be third with a nice advantage of their own over XL Racing by Ren Velton, 4 points ahead of Grip Hacks Engineering in that 11 Ferrari. So it's still all to play for here, and Cody Pride has taken another 3/10 out of the leaders now, Andy. So it's certainly, he's reeling them in now as we look at this battle there between the two fantastic looking and gorgeous sounding Aston Martins, the turbocharged V8s in these things. Unbelievable engines, to be honest. It's a Mercedes engine, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't really care because it sounds and looks incredible.
I have to say, when I first heard the new Aston Martin engine at the start of it, would have been 2019 when I first heard it trackside, I wasn't really that keen because it's a much more subdued noise than the outgoing version of the Aston Martin Vantage GT3. But it's really grown on me, actually. It's a really nice, subtle sound, but still it hits all the right notes, quite literally, without being sort of too in your face, if you see what I mean. So, and you're absolutely right about the styling of the thing. It is a beautiful looking car, and it's pretty good in these conditions, we think. So the two Aston Martins that are in the top 10 here, Max Vollmuth and Jan Willem van Ommen, are both going to be looking to try and capitalise on their cars' wet weather ability. The lead gap then is 2.5 seconds, so Cody Pride was another 10th quicker on the previous lap. There's Chris Melbourne then. So after his second pit stop, he's rejoined in 16th place. He's got a bit of a gap. Well, it's Marco Bischoff ahead of him in the number 16 Porsche, and then about 10 seconds to Killian Ryan Meenan in the 888 Aston Martin that he's taken over from James Parker. I also spotted that the number 41 car of Igor Ogrodnikov pitted a couple of laps ago, and in that car is now Alexander Novikov, but that was not in any way during the pit window that driver change took place. So I don't know if they attempted a driver change during the pit window and for some reason they couldn't get Alexander to connect or something, but they have now done the driver change, albeit out of that designated 10-minute window.
Yeah, that's intriguing, very intriguing. There's a few of them sort of up and down the order. There's a big send by Melbourne in the Bentley, now cracking on with it, with the number 16 Porsche just in front of him. Now, I'm confused by Bischoff here in the 16 Porsche, because don't we have a Bischoff in the Ferrari as well?
No, I was going to say that, but then I didn't want to say something stupid.
No, I'll go for it, mate. I'll be stupid if you want me to be. But we've got Marco Bischoff in the 991 Ferrari, and then Max Bischoff in the number 16 Porsche. It did confuse me at first, because I was like, I'm sure Bischoff was in a Ferrari before, but obviously both their first names begin with M as well, so on the timing tower it looked like it was the same person. I was thinking, you traitor, but fair play, you know, if you're in two teams, then, you know, you've got two shots at the championship. But yeah, indeed, one Bischoff for another at the moment, it seems, but still, it's intriguing to watch these drivers develop as these conditions go on. And one thing I always say about wet weather driving is that some drivers have an unbelievable bag of talent for this sort of thing, and others, they don't quite fall by the wayside, but they just don't have the same capability. You always get the odd certain drivers, don't you, and obviously car combinations as well, that really shine in the rain, quite literally sometimes.
Yeah, you've got to be smooth, haven't you? It's always the drivers that are smooth that go well in the rain. It's something that Jenson Button really excelled at in Formula 1. You know, those who can have really smooth pedal and wheel inputs, because the last thing you need to be doing is making any sudden movements, because in the wet you don't have the mechanical grip then to allow the car to keep up with those sudden movements. You've got to be really smooth on the controls, and that is surprisingly difficult to do. And yeah, you're right, there are some drivers that just can't ever really quite get their head around it, and then some that just take to it really well. Nicholas Huben here seems pretty comfortable in these conditions. He's closed in here on Jesse Kauppinen in the 5th place Gripax Engineering Ferrari. Really could do with scoring a few more points out of this race. 5th place would still be a decent effort for the number 11 team. It would be their 3rd top 5 finish of the season. After that DNF 2 weeks ago, they really wanted to try and win here today in order to try and keep their title hopes alive. As it stands then, it would just be a 2-horse race in the championship, with Random Pasta Bowl and UKOG at the moment the only two teams that can still win the title going into the final race in 2 weeks' time at the Spa circuit in Belgium, where I really wouldn't be at all surprised to see the weather gods perhaps throw an extra bit of spice into that race as well. It is known to occasionally rain at Spa, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Much like the Nürburgring, it has its own climate, basically. and the Ardennes Forest is of no exception to a lot of that region of Belgium, apparently, for having that sort of attribute to it. But yeah, it is going to certainly set up a fantastic season finale, with weather always being the question on people's minds, but even more so when you get to Spa. So we continue to watch the beautiful pair of Aston Martins, then the Delking YT machine, obviously YouTube abbreviation, chasing down Volmuth in the number 71 car. Dutch flag, of course, on the side of Jan Willem van Ommen's car. So home race for him. I was thinking earlier, speaking of home races, obviously Niels van der Kokel in the McLaren at the front. It's just fantastically fitting that it's a bright orange McLaren as well. The Dutchies love their bright orange things, as we all know and love. But certainly to have a bright orange McLaren leading the way here does seem fitting. But you have to raise the question, how long will that last? So here is Nicholas Huben in the number 15 Porsche, trying to displace that number 11 Ferrari. And look, he's just doing these little dives down the inside here, just slightly going off the racing line. There is a slightly drier line. It's not completely dry, though, but you can see that there is a bit of a difference on the normal racing line here. You will expect to see these drivers sort of pulling out to the side on the straights, you know, taking a bit of a wider line through some of the corners just to keep those wet tyres in the right operating temperature, won't you? And it seems like some of them are actually doing that down the inside as an excuse to sort of have a go, if you will.
The trouble is, in the wet, though, you've got to fully commit to an overtake, really, to make it happen. But once you've committed in the wet, you can't really do anything then to back out of it, because you're just going to, if you hit the brakes any harder, you're going to lock up, slide into the other car. If you try and turn the wheel any sharper, the same kind of thing will happen. So you've got to be absolutely certain that that move is going to work. You can't really go for one of those sort of 50-50 dives in the wet, because it's almost always going to end up in contact. So Nicholas Huben will definitely have that on his mind here as he heads down into the chicane here. You can see the way these two Aston Martins are catching them, though, can't you? You've got Volmuth and Jan Willem van Ommen, who were on the previous lap, both a few tenths quicker than the Ferrari and the Porsche ahead. So this could very soon become a four-way scrap for 5th place then. Make their way out through the Arie Luyendyk curve onto the pit straight once again. And I don't think that Huben is going to be quite close enough to do anything with the race leader on this particular occasion. You can see there exactly what Chaz was talking about, though. The Porsche of Huben just pulling well off the racing line, running through that wetter part of the track just to cool the tyres down. Because even in these really wet conditions, which are exactly what these wet tyres were made for, they're still getting very hot, because they're a softer compound. Those rubber blocks, they move around, they generate heat, and so even though in theory the tyres should be able to handle these conditions pretty well, you still want to try and keep bringing those temperatures down as much as you can.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, even with a bit of understeer, you know, if you scrub the fronts a little bit too much, if you put your foot down a little bit too hastily and spin up the rear slightly, you can very quickly spike the temperatures in these things, and they will sort of almost float across the surface. It's a real minefield, is wet weather racing, but it's a beautiful one to watch. The cars are dancing around like mad. The drivers are adapting as quickly as possible. The conditions are always changing as well. You know, while the rain does often stay quite consistent here in Assetto Corsa Competizione, it does have different levels to it. You know, it can get heavier, it can get lighter as well. So it's not almost like there is an on-off with the rain here, as you would have seen in potentially Sims or games of many moons ago. It's very intriguing for us to see, as the Aston Martins are definitely catching this number 11 Ferrari now. The Porsche has got in front, and again, still no move by the Astons behind, but I think maybe they're just trying to work together to get on the back of these guys and know that they could probably pick them off one by one and then continue having their battle and moving forward. But it certainly confirms what we were saying earlier about the Astons being good in the wet.
Yeah, they just seem a bit more stable, don't they, in these conditions. They've got in a nice sort of controlled drift through the corners, and it looked like Volmuth had a bit of a run there, actually, coming out of the Arie Luyendyk curve. Jonas van Druyten, meanwhile, trying to challenge Karim Mattea for 3rd place. There, look, is the silver Aston Martin of Volmuth. He's not quite close enough into Tarzan, though. But the Aston Martin just holding its line a little bit better, isn't he? And just needs to try and find that gap at the right part of the circuit to actually make the overtake stick then. The 4 of them, though, absolutely nose to tail. And, well, you'd think the rate at which the Aston Martins caught these two, they should be able to breeze straight through, but I don't think they're going to have it quite that easy. Over the top of the hill they go then, through turns 4, 5, and then into 6, and then into Shivlak, this quick right-hander over the top of the circuit. This group then all lapping in the sort of high 42s, low 43s. The top 2, though, Chaz, Van der Kokelt and Pride, making a bit of a mockery of them, aren't they, though? Because Van der Kekelt, a low 42. Pride is still in the 41s. That is incredible.
Yeah, that's unbelievable pace, to be fair. But again, when you get a driver on a track that is changing, you sort of get used to where you put less lock on, where you're in maybe a different gear, where you have to be a little bit smoother on the throttle. Some of these guys, people call them aliens, people call them robots. Some of them are like robotic in the way that they drive. The muscle memory is absolutely incredible, and it's why they are so high up in terms of the pedestals we'd put them on of how good they are just at this. This is their prime hunting ground. This is what they do best, and we're watching them do it now. But the adaptation by Cody Pride to be able to do that and continue to do it as these guys are all over the road taking the mick out of track limits, it's just insane. It's great to see it. And I mean, to be honest, if he's going to go after the race leader and try and retain that championship lead and even extend it ahead of the final round, then I think that he's doing a great job, especially with the aforementioned pressure that he's got on him for this race meeting. But now we have Jan Willem van Ommen hopefully trying to be... Oh, no! We have the 991 Ferrari into the back of the 340 Bentley, and freebies not quite the order of the day for the guys behind. We've got the BMW trying to come through there, but of course not for position. But contact between those two, these cars are even more prone to spinning when you have a tiny tap in the wet, aren't they?
Yeah, now that means Van Druyten is into third. So if he was the aggressor there, then he probably needs to give that place back. We believe he was. If there's a risk of a penalty here, I think he needs to give that place back to Karim Matea, because that can sometimes just get you off the hook. Because they didn't lose any places to anybody else, if you sort of reverse the positions immediately, you might just be looked on more favourably by the stewards.
Yeah.
It has, though, brought them both well into the clutches, hasn't it, of Huben, Kauppinen, Volmuth and Van Ommen. So it's now not just a four-way fight for position, it is a six-car scrap, and it's actually now potentially for a podium place. So that is some real drama. That was contact up through Hugenholtz then, turn number 3. And what on earth happened there? We'd seen, hadn't we, that Van Druyten had sort of been looking at getting past the Bentley for a number of laps, and we believe that when a move was attempted, there was a little bit of a tap in the tail, which sent them both around. So, again, we'll get a replay of that when we can, but for now, let's see if there's any damage. Let's see whether or not Nicholas Huben, for example, is able to challenge the Bentley, which, remember, is third in the championship. They were already, though, going to be in a position that would see them out of championship contention by the end of the race, and that little spin, unfortunately, Chaz, hasn't done them any help whatsoever in trying to get back into that championship fight.
No, for sure, and like you say, if they do give the position back, they just have to be careful to make sure that they only give a position back to the Bentley. Let's see how it happens then. A bit of a weight transfer here from the left to the right, over the crest, onto the brakes. The car just isn't slowing down. It's the tiniest of kisses, to be fair, and it really is a very innocent mistake from the Ferrari. And if I'm honest, I think the Bentley got off quite lightly there. They could have been collected by the BMW that was coming through as well. They could have even been collected more so by the Ferrari. They could have had a second hit that knocked something out of place. But yeah, the Ferrari's still off up into the distance at the moment, and I agree that they should give that back. It may have been an honest mistake, but they could even be more honest and sort of hold your hands up and say, yep, I messed up, you have it back. We don't want to gain a position that way. But it's a tough one, because a lot of the drivers, you weren't going for a move there, so they won't sort of look at it as, I went for a move and I messed up. It was just simply, I messed up. And some drivers won't see that as reasons to give it back, unfortunately. But we wait and see whether they do that. But I think at the moment, they just don't want to risk it, because they've got the 5 cars now led by that Bentley, with the number 15 Porsche of Huben right up behind them, crawling all over the back of it. But it then comes back to the point we raised earlier, where it's hard to see round that Bentley and make sure you hit your marks. And especially in these conditions, you need to make sure that you can do that.
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, Van Druyten's got a pretty clear view now, because he hoofed the Bentley out of the way. But yeah, I'm fairly certain that will be looked on dimly by the race stewards. There is the Ferrari. You can see the gap he's got. You can see the problem he's got as well. If he wanted to give this place back, as Chaz was saying, he would almost certainly end up losing at least one other place to Nicholas Huben, because Huben is now right on the tail of the big Bentley as they head towards the very same bit of the track that Karim Matea was spun at a couple of laps ago, through turn number 2, then into the Hugenholtz, and the Porsche just carries that bit more speed into the turn. Darren King almost doing the same thing there, just tickling the back of Max Volmuth's Aston Martin as they go through that left-hander. And the cars that have a bit more grip, you can carry more momentum through that turn. It sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier on. Once you commit to a corner, especially in these conditions, if the car in front suddenly checks up, you cannot do a thing about it because you're already committed to the turn. You can't slow down anymore at that point. So, although it was clearly unintentional, will definitely, I think, go down as being Van Dreuten's fault, but it's perfectly understandable as to how that happened because we just saw at least one, maybe two examples in this group of exactly the same thing happening again.
Yeah, it's very, very close to contact from a number of these guys right now. Willem van Ormen just having a right old wiggle there as he went into the very aptly named Box 9. And he's trying it on the left-hand side here, but again, in these conditions, you just don't go for that. Or do you? He says, shut up, Chaz, watch this, mate. I'll go around the outside. Then I've got the inside. What a lovely move that was. Absolutely stunning stuff from the 38. He says, right, I'm sick of looking at the back of your Aston Martin now. You look at the back of mine. Let's move forward and let's go. That was so, so precise. And to do that in these conditions, Andy, that was glorious stuff. More of that, please.
Inch perfect and squeaky clean as well. A little bit of paint traded as they went through the corner, but nothing untoward. That is exactly how you do it. Now, Nicholas Huben on Karim Mattea for 4th place. Is he close enough? The Bentley just gets into Tarzan ahead, but is it going to wash up the track? No, not quite. It manages to pick up the second apex there, carry some speed out of the turn and keep that Porsche behind. But can the 38 Aston Martin, now that it's gained that position, can it continue that run of momentum up through this pack? He's got a Ferrari ahead now, but they're all being delayed, aren't they, by the Bentley, which really, you can see, it, despite the fact that it is nicknamed the Boatley, it is surprisingly not at home when it gets wet out there, is it? It's really sliding around. It doesn't look compliant at all. And it's only the fact that Karim Mattea is able to keep the car vaguely on the racing line that he is keeping that Porsche behind. There was actually then a mistake from Huben, just as I said that. And look who arrives on the scene now. It's that 38 Aston Martin of Jan-Willem van Ormen, who tries to go up the inside. Does he? He's going to try and attack immediately here on Jesse Kauppinen. Couldn't get up the inside there. He's going to maybe try it into the left-hander at turn 10. Decides not to, but he's keen, isn't he? Now he's gained one position. He's got the momentum. He's got the pace. He doesn't want to sort of stall out now behind Kauppinen. He wants to keep on picking them up, putting them down, and moving up the order quickly.
Yeah, he's got that confidence. He knows what he can do with the car now. He thought, right, stuff it. We're going to go for a move. We're going to push the limits a little bit, see what it's capable of. And now he's hit that limit. He knows exactly where he can push the car to. And he's thinking, right then, I'm not against an Aston Martin this time, so it's not the same car as what I'm driving, but it's a Ferrari. Very different kettle of fish, as he says, right then, the Ferrari's got off the circuit. I'll go down the inside. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely awareness. And oh, there is contact. The Ferrari goes into the wall. Not sure if that was the Ferrari squeezing him or whether he was running wide there, but now that opens the door for the number 71 Aston Martin to come back through. It's a real shame for the number 11, but at the end of the day, I think it was almost inevitable going that close around the final corner. They got very lucky not to have a bigger incident there because they're very, very quick out of that last corner, but I think Willem van Ormen's got away with that quite lightly there, and it means there's a bit more real estate now for Huben to have a go at Mattea, but for how long?
Yeah, it does sort of relieve some of the pressure, doesn't it, from Huben? You can see how close he is looked to the Amiga G Performance Bentley ahead of him. We're getting news of a drive-through penalty, though, for our third-place car. That is Jonas van Dreuten. That will be for the contact with Karim Mattea at the Hugenholz. And so the Ferrari that had just moved into a podium place is being given a drive-through. And you have to ask, Chaz, would that have been different if he'd backed off and not taken the place? Because initially, after the contact had been made, he had the time to do it, didn't he? He had the space there. There's more contact with the Bentley now. Not once, but twice going into turn 10 does Nicholas Huben get into the back of him, because Huben can see Willem van Ormen arriving on the scene, can't he? He wants to get this done quickly. But I really do think that if Van Dreuten had given that place back, they might just have been able to live to fight another day. As it is, a drive-through will put them right to the back of the top 10.
Yeah, you could argue it's a bit of a harsh one, but at the end of the day, they did make contact and they gained the position unfairly, whether they were going for a move or not. So I'm afraid that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. They're going to have to take that one on the chin. I think maybe he just thought, right, let's push on and just, if we get it, we get it. And now it's come around, I'm afraid. But yeah, this battle is very, very much not over right now. The 38 Aston Martin is eyeing up a possible podium here. They want to get past the Porsche and past the Bentley, who of course is nipping at the heels quite literally. He's just chewing the splitter, or the diffuser at least, of that Bentley at the moment. You can always see the gearbox through the back of the rear diffuser on those Bentleys. Maybe he's just thinking, right, maybe I could actually get to that if I just chip away at it enough. But it's got a lot of old bodywork on it as the Boatley. as you rightly mentioned before, it doesn't actually look very comfortable considering the name. It's quite hilarious. Whack a P&O logo on the side of it. It might look quite right. But even still, Hubin is trying everything at the moment, and Mattea, hats off to him, he's holding him off. He's doing a great job of it. He's really making Hubin work for it, and he's backing him up into those two pesky Aston Martins right now. But look at the speed mid-corner that Willem van Ormen has got round there. Absolutely planted it, looked round there, into turn 9, or box 9 as it's known. Now we're going to get a replay here and see. This is the move out the final corner. Look at the amount of speed the Ferrari loses there. Aston down the inside. Oh, he does get a bit of a wiggle mid-corner. There is a tiny, tiny little wiggle. He corrects it very, very nicely, but it's just enough to tip him into the Ferrari. I don't think that was too untoward there.
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. They could look at that either way. At the end of the day, there was nothing there that Kauppinen could have done to avoid the contact, could he? So
yeah,
you definitely can't apportion the blame to the Ferrari. That means you kind of have to put the blame onto Willem van Ormen, but I don't know. We'll wait and see. We'll leave that to the stewards to decide. Meanwhile, Cody Pride putting in a really solid stint here. When he came out to the pit lane, he was about 2.9 seconds behind Niels van der Kerkelt, the race leader. He has chipped away at that slowly but surely. It's down to 1.7 now, with just under a quarter of an hour to go. Here comes Hubin around the outside of Mattea, though, for fourth place at Tarzan. He might just do it on accident. Off goes Mattea into the barriers. He comes back on the track right in front of the Griphax Engineering Ferrari, which somehow missed him. And Karim Mattea is off the road, having put in a sterling defensive effort up until that point. He just tried to close the door on the exit of the corner, but Hubin was coming around the outside with momentum. They met in the middle, and sadly, it's the Bentley that gets fired off into the scenery. A really, really unfortunate bit of contact, that, because that had been a brilliant drive by Mattea up until that point, hadn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I must say, I think that he thought that he'd cleared the Porsche on the exit of the corner. There was the tiniest bit of overlap, and that's always the most painful one. When there is a tiny overlap, there's more angle that you're going to push the other car off at, unfortunately, rather than it just being sort of like wheel-to-wheel contact. And he just hooked the rear splitter, or rear diffuser, get it right, Chaz, of that Bentley. He's been chewing away at it, but it's not made it any shorter. And unfortunately, I think I have to say the Bentley just ran wide, thinking that the coast was clear on Hubin, and Hubin not really in the wrong there. It's a fantastic move around the outside to go for it. He managed to carry the speed, and he also kept the overlap, but that unfortunately was the demise of the Bentley there. So we'll have to see how he gets on with the damage. He's 8th place at the moment, but that means now that Willem van Ormen could potentially grab a podium out of this, because all of a sudden he knows he's quicker than this Porsche when it was behind the Bentley. Now he's got a bit of time to try and assess whether he's quicker than it over a lap normally with the Porsche in clear air. I think, honestly, that they could go for this. Now here is a look down front. Look how close they get there, Andy. That was incredible. But there is the overlap, and yeah, there's no two ways about that in my mind. The 11th Ferrari, by the way, wow, that was close, that.
I think that probably caught Jonas van Drooten, Jesse Kauppinen's attention, that, when the big Bentley sort of slid gracefully across its bows as it went out of turn number 1. That was really, really close to disaster. But yeah, you can't put any of the blame at the door of Nicholas Hubin there. He was holding his own on the outside. He was right up against the white line, couldn't go any further left. And yeah, the Bentley, unfortunately, did rather close the door on him. Again, look, you can see Jan Willem van Ormen is just so quick through these quick right-handers at the top end of the circuit. But then out of the tight corners, the rear-engined Porsche has a bit more traction maybe, and just sort of scoots away. It's a really fascinating battle, this, between two cars that generate their lap time in completely different ways. They couldn't be designed in any more of a sort of polar opposite manner. You've got the engine hanging out over the rear axle of the Porsche. All of the weight is over the back half of the car. The exact opposite with the Aston Martin. It's front engined. It makes all of its grip with that front aero. You can really stick the nose of the car into the corner and then maybe be a bit slower on the exit, whereas the Porsche, it's all about that corner exit, isn't it? Getting off those tight corners, getting the weight over the rear, and powering out of the turn, and it is making for fascinating racing here with just 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's mainly why the Porsche works around here. You do get some circuits where corner entry is so important. Obviously, corner exit, a lot of the time, is very important all around the world, but at somewhere like Zandvoort, corner exit is the absolute king, if you ask me. You know, you can be good on the brakes and good at sending it in, but if you don't get a good run out of the corner, you can't line yourself up for the next one. You usually get a bit of a wait, much like you do with a lot of the old school circuits. You get a bit of time between each sort of heavy braking zone to get something sorted, but it all depends on how good a run you get. You can see that Willem van Onmen is, I'm going to say his name right one day, he's getting a bit of a wider line through the left-hander there to try and keep the tyres a bit of a better operating temperature, but it just harms his run out of here. But then down the right-hander that we have here at Shivlak, it just looks so planted. Look at the way he turns it in. It's so smooth, and then all of a sudden it seems to close up on the exit like that. It's absolutely incredible. We can sort of pick apart the characteristics of these cars by how they behave at every single corner here. We're just getting used to them doing the same thing again and again, but now he's really starting to move around behind this number 15 Porsche. This could be a podium place here, so let's keep our fingers crossed that this one ends cleanly. It's been a great drive by the Del King YouTube Aston Martin so far, or at least I hope the YT is for YouTube, but I don't know. I mean, Hubin's done a fantastic job of defending so far, but I think it's a case of when, not if. What about you?
Yeah, I think so. The Aston Martin just has the raw pace, and when you're under this sort of pressure as well as Nicholas Huben is, you are just far more likely to make a mistake, and it will only take the slightest little slip up here from Huben, and that will be it. So the 38 Aston Martin will be straight up the inside, and wriggling its way through into a podium position. The lead gap, by the way, is still hovering at 1.7 seconds, so we're not missing anything there. You are on board with the 4th place driver then. This is the 38 Aston Martin of Jan Willem van Ommen, who is in the slipstream. He's really forcing Huben to defend into turn number 1. Into the braking zone he goes, round the outside line. They almost touch, they do touch the Aston Martin out wide, and just about manages to stay on the island. That was really close to disaster. But again, Huben sort of Teflon coated, isn't it? He just seems to be able to fend off the attacks. That was the closest, though, that the Aston Martin has been to making that move. Just couldn't quite do it.
And it shows quite an interesting dynamic now between these Aston Martins as well, because Volmuth is not able to stick with these guys. Even though they are doing a bit of fighting amongst themselves, he's not right there with them. You know, earlier on we saw this where Willem van Ommen was right behind him when he was chasing down the Porsche, because they were just kept together by the battling that was going on. But that 71 Aston Martin just doesn't have the same pace. Look at the run that he's got through there. Now he looks to the inside, down the inside of the Porsche. The Porsche comes in, tries to block it off. There's door-to-door action one way, then the other. It was forceful, but at the end of the day, the 15 Porsche tried to block it off. The contact made sure that they both ran a bit wide, tried to get back on with it. It wasn't the easiest of angles to judge that from, unfortunately, but I don't think there was too much wrong with that, really, from the Aston Martin's part. He put the nose down the inside. The Porsche continued to close that line off, and I think he paid for that.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think Huben had moved to the middle of the road to defend, and then when he realised that the Aston Martin was going to commit to the move, he tried to move even further to the right, but you're moving in the braking zone then, so I tend to agree with you on that one. So that now frees the Aston Martin in 3rd position. It means Max Volmuth now moves on to the tail of Nicholas Huben as well, and Volmuth in that 71 car, they are, as it stands, only 3 points away from snatching 3rd in the championship from the Bentley, which is just on your screen there, of Karim Mattea. So if either Mattea loses another position or 2, or Volmuth gains another position or 2, that could see a change for 3rd in the championship going into that championship decider in 2 weeks' time. And it looks as though Mattea might well lose a couple more positions here. His lap times are in the 46s. Those around him are doing 42s and 43s. So that damage to the 340 car is clearly hurting him, and it does look as though he might just lose another place here. He's got Leonardo Porco. Sorry, no, that is the 111, I beg your pardon, that is on his tail. That is Daniel Amoff, and that would be for 8th position. The McLaren, though, behind is a lap down. So actually, Mattea not under quite as much pressure as it would first appear. That, by the way, is Nick Babin in the 125 car. So after their hardware issues earlier on, they've got the car back out there, and it is running in 23rd position. But a case of what could have been, really, for a car that was running in the top 10 at the time.
Yeah, it's a real shame to see the demise of that car, to be honest, and it was great to see how well it was going, you know, true to form as we expected from the Bentleys around here, and even when it was wet, you know, still going pretty well as well. I just wanted to sort of ask the question, what do you think that Daniel says to his team when he's had an accident and he's off the circuit? I'll leave that one with you. But to be honest, Porco is quite a while back from these guys now in the 728 Porsche, so he's not got too much to worry about. He wants to go for a move on the Bentley in front, really. At the same time, though, the McLaren trying to unlap itself could be the biggest distraction in the world right now, and one of the best looking ones, I have to say.
Yes, the penny did drop eventually. It took a couple seconds longer than I'd care to admit, but yeah. Very good, Chaz, very good. Ninth place then for Daniel at the moment, and Karen Mateus Bentley is a rather large target that he's got in his sights here as it comes out of the final turn, and he tries now to get that run, but the downforce that the Bentley is lacking because of that damage it's had means that the Porsche comes off that final corner quite a bit more quickly, but then the Bentley still has good straight line speed, so if there is damage, it's certainly not affecting the top speed of the big Bentley Continental GT3, which for now holds on to 8th place. Amazingly, Chaz, we're into the final 5 minutes of this race. It really has flown by. 51 laps have been completed by the leader, and Niels van der Kelt is that race leader. He is now over 2 seconds clear of Cody Pride as well, so Cody, I think, maybe settling for second place here. Those two, though, are half a minute clear of the third place Aston Martin. Half a minute clear. I know that we've had changeable conditions here, but it's not like those two have made sort of one less pit stop than the rest. That is just raw pace that they've had over the rest of the field. There is a reason, isn't there, that those are the two teams at the top of the points table, and at the moment they're the only two teams that will be going into the championship decider fighting for the title.
And I'd like to point out as well that McLaren's got 15 kilos in it and the Porsche's got 30. So even with the balance of performance weight in them as well, they're still flying. Look at that. We spoke about Inch Perfect earlier on. Daniel Amoff doing a fantastic job there of just sliding one way to the other behind the Bentley, not quite making it work. But he's certainly making sure that his intentions are made clear here. But you said it before, that Bentley doesn't seem too hindered by whatever damage it has in this scenario. Up against that Porsche right now doesn't seem to be too bad. Now, Willem van Ommen is a man on a mission as well right now. Obviously up into third place. He's in the clear air. He's starting to disappear up the road, and he's actually quicker than the race leaders on that previous lap. A 142.5 for him, 142.7 for both the cars ahead. It's not going to be enough to catch them up at the end, but it's certainly going to be enough to keep them happy, because they'll be obviously saying to them, right, this is the pace we've had, look at what we've got, and oh, there you go. Well, there's a turn up for the books. I clearly misheard what Michael Hamlet was saying for a moment, because he was saying about third place, and yeah, well, never mind. Carry on.
So, apparently the stewards weren't happy that they relied on contact to make the move, which, yeah, I kind of get it, but I think that's a little harsh, actually. I do think that Nicholas Huber moved over in the braking point, but they have deemed it a push to pass, and so that is why the penalty, well, it's not a penalty, it's just a request, an order from race control that you must give the place back. It's if they don't give the place back that they may then face a penalty. So, harsh decision, I guess, but the sooner they give it back, Chaz, the more time they'll have then to try and regain the place. If they do it now, they at least leave themselves a lap or so to try and get it back.
So, there you go, the Porsche moves in, but it's that bit there, I think, that they're probably not happy with. The second bit. So the Aston couldn't avoid the first bit of contact that they made with the Porsche rather than the Porsche making with it, because the car was sideways. But then I think, regardless of what he did, it did look like they ran them out wide on the second part, almost as if to say, like, you gave it, now take it back, sort of thing, which I'd argue is all fair, but you shouldn't rise to it. So they're back now behind them, and suddenly this battle is reignited once again. The Dell King UIT, Aston Martin, all over the back of the Porsche now. You can imagine slightly enraged, if that's even the correct phrase to call it. Just over a minute left of this race, and now they have to think about Volmuth behind as well in the 71 Aston Martin, because he's obviously a lot closer than he was before. So intriguing to see, but I think this may be the last lap of the race now, Andy. This might be cut close, actually.
Well, the leader is at turn 10, so yeah, I think they'll just scrape through, but it is going to be tight. I think we should get up to 55 laps, though, in this race. This is lap 54 that Niels van der Kelt is on, heads down into the Hans-Ernst spot then, and will make his way through onto the final lap. He'd love to be in a position, I guess, where he could maybe back off and make this the last lap. He doesn't have that luxury, because Cody Pride is back within 2 seconds of him again. Cody doing everything he needs to here, really. He's keeping the pressure on Niels. He's sort of telling him, well, no, you can't just back off and coast home. You're going to have to keep your concentration up for the final lap or so. There's a big knot of traffic up the road as well, which Niels will be hoping that he doesn't catch by the end, but they do now go on to that final lap of the races. Jan-Willem van Ommen has a lap and a bit then to try and get back into that third place ahead of Nicholas Huben. The thing is, though, Nicholas sort of knows what's coming now, doesn't he? Because Jan has almost shown his hand, and he's sort of demonstrated where he might try and make the move. So Nicholas is going to make absolutely sure not to leave the door open there again.
Yeah, that's it. He's had that chance. It's not often that you get a chance really to see what somebody can do, and then you get back in front of them, and then you go, right, try it again. Let's do that again. It's almost like when you used to be able to rewind things on the Race Driver Grid when that first came out, and you could rewind time when you've had a crash or something. It was completely innovative.
I never had to do that, Charles. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mate, honestly, the amount of wheels that I knocked off Formula 1000 cars or F1000 cars, you would not believe. But we're on to the dying moments of the race now, and everybody is holding their breath, waiting to see whether Jan Willem van Ommen, get it right, Chaz, can actually make the move, because it looks to me like Huben's got in the place now where he's really comfortable with the car, and he's actually opening up a gap. If anything, Volmuth is closer to Jan at this point.
It's this next section, isn't it, where Jan has been quick, but I agree, he's further back now than he has been on previous laps. So even if he gets back onto the tail of Huben, he might not be close enough to actually make a move. He just sails, though, around the right-hander there at Schivlak, in towards turn number 8 then. And you can see how he's halved the gap, if not more, into the corner where they made contact, and that's exactly what I meant. Look, Huben knew he had to defend there, goes to the inside line, so Jan Willem van Ommen goes to the outside, cuts back to the right-hand side, but now the track goes to the left again. Is he brave enough to try and hang it around the outside? No, he tries the switchback, but the Porsche is there. Meanwhile, Niels van der Kakelt at his home race comes through to take the UKOG 47 squad's first victory of the season, and what a crucial one it could be. They close the gap in the championship going into the championship decider in 2 weeks' time. Cody Pride brings the random pasta ball Porsche home in second place, though, and still scores 42 valuable championship points. The gap then will come down to 20 points, with 50 still on the table. Spa in 2 weeks. For third place there, Nicholas Huben looks as though he might do enough, although Jan Willem van Ommen is going to be quick out of the Arie Luijendijk curve, goes right out to the edge of the road, but he will not get there, so it's going to be the number 15 car then that comes through to take third place. The Unicorns of Love are on the podium, with the 38 Dalking Aston Martin in fourth. Max Volmuth there scores some valuable championship points for the 71 car in their quest to finish third in the championship. They round out the top 5 in the race. Good battle going on here, meanwhile, just outside the top 10. This is Grant Willemot in the number 100 Aston Martin, who has just moved into that 11th place, in fact, on the final lap of the race. And Max Bischoff here on the tail of Killian Ryan Meenan, and for the 888 Aston Martin, their race really derailed inside the opening 10 or 15 minutes after that contact that they had with the 41 Aston Martin. But even right onto the last half a lap, Chaz, it is still great to see these really, really close battles up and down the order.
Yeah, indeed. Killian Ryan Meenan's got his hands full here. Max Bischoff all over the back of him. Oh, it was almost Bish and then off. But no, manages to keep it on the road. I think there was a tiny bit of contact. The camera jinked in sort of anticipation of it up the curb as well. Bischoff is trying absolutely everything to climb his way around that Aston Martin, but still somehow Killian Ryan Meenan fends Bish off. And that was a fantastic conclusion to the race there. The changing conditions certainly made it interesting, but one of the main points to raise for me there, Andy, is just how those top two absolutely decimated everyone over the time difference at the front of the field. It was just something else. Fantastic effort by those guys. You have to applaud them for that.
Yeah, the winning margin was less than 2 seconds after 90 minutes. That's quite close.
Oh, yeah.
Second to third was about 34 seconds, though. And then third place all the way back to 6th place, that was less than 2 seconds again between them. So it's still really close, it's still really competitive, but those two teams, the 47 and the 992, they have just been the class of the field all season, really. I said earlier on that Random Pasta Bowl didn't have a good start to the year at Misano with that 17th place, but they then went on and won the other 3 races. For UKOG 47, though, they've never been out of the top 5 all season. They had a 5th at Misano, 4th at Kyalami, 3rd at Bathurst, another 4th last time at the Nürburgring, and now, finally, here at Zandvoort, they are the race winners, and it is Niels van der Kakelt then who brought the car home. The car started by George Boothby, and those two will be very, very happy to have got their first victory of the season. Interview time now, though. Let's start having a word with some of our podium finishing drivers, and I think we'll start maybe in 3rd place, because we've got Lars Kisser and Nicholas Huben here. Then they were piloting that number 15 Unicorns of Love Porsche, which was up in the fight for a podium place really all race long, but a lot of the action and entertainment for those two came in the final couple of minutes, really, of the race. So let's have a word with them then. It was Lars Kisser who started the car, and Lars, you were watching on, I'm sure, just now as Nicholas was getting involved in a really, really entertaining fight, but your stint was pretty eventful as well.
Good evening, everyone. So my first couple of laps have been pretty intense. I had really close fights and moved up 2 positions at the start already, but after that stint, I actually made quite a few mistakes and had to let a couple of cars go back through. And yeah, then Niklas took the car and he carried us home into 3rd position.
You make that sound a lot easier than I'm sure it was. I mean, your starting position really, Lars, put you right in the bit of the field where there's almost always contact at the start, so you must have been a little bit nervous about that opening half a lap or so.
So I watched the replay, I saw that it was quite close at a few times, but I didn't even realize it from my cockpit view. So yeah, but after the race and replay, I saw that I almost got spun twice. So yeah, it was pretty close.
Speaking of close there, Nicholas, you were in the car for that second part of the race, and we saw an awful lot of your battle there that you were having for that 3rd position. There was a little bit of contact at one point. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, I'm so damn wet at the moment. I sweat so much. The pressure from behind was really intense, especially from the Aston. Yeah, there was already 2 times contact. One time with the Ferrari and one time with the Aston. And yeah, I think the one with the Aston, you saw that in the penalty report. He had to give us a position back, but it was still unbelievable exhausting.
Of course, you had the wet conditions. Well, you had wet conditions in your sim, it seems, but certainly on track it was a bit wet as well. And the Porsche, I would imagine, is a bit of a handful sometimes in the wet. Is it a little bit twitchy, a little bit hard to drive in these conditions?
To be honest, I was surprised how good it felt, but to be honest, it was a full dry setup, and I did not drive 1 lap in the wet before. For this, I'm very, very happy for the finish.
Well, it's excellent to see you on the podium, your first podium of the season as well, off the back of a top 5 last time at the Nürburgring. Lars, are you looking forward to Spa in 2 weeks' time? Can you go and get that first win, do you think?
We will see. I think we have a pretty good chance when the BOP is fine that we can fight in the Porsche, but we will see. It's also pretty tough to drive there, especially in longer races with Rouge, where the car really bottoms out a lot. So it's quite tough to get the car running through there quite soon, so we will see.
Excellent. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Lars, Nicholas, congratulations on the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our 3rd place finishers then, very happy with that, I would imagine. Let's switch our attention now, though, to the team that came home in 2nd place, because we've got Cody Pride and we've got, of course, Maciej Malinowski, who started that car, who are with us now. And, well, what a tough race these two had. Guys, congratulations on the 2nd place. Maciej, we'll start with you, because your first stint really went almost perfectly, didn't it? You held the lead into turn 1, but then George was never really that far behind you, was he?
Well, yeah, that's why it wasn't. That's because it wasn't perfect. So we got the perfect quali because we knew that there is like high 33 in the car, and I basically did 34 flat. So that was amazing lap. I'm really happy with that. And from there on, it was our race to lose. So we went for the strategy with fuel, just 50-50, but the rain came just at the very end of the pit window. So I had to actually fuel save in my stint to go far into the stint to get into the stints where the rain comes, right? So that's when the George caught up to me because I just had to fuel save. But I managed to be in the front. Car felt amazing. George was putting a lot of pressure on me, so we were both flying. We were both on the limit. So even though I had to fuel save, I managed to do that. We got to the rain, and the only job I had to do was stop correctly in my pit box, and that's the thing I didn't do. So that cost us a win. because I think apart from that, the pit stop was good. We didn't have any damage to repair. The car started up immediately and went forward straight away. So I just missed the pit box. We went up the jacks. It just took longer for us to go up the jacks, and that cost us basically P1. And later, there was just no way for Cody to go by Niels, even if he would have caught him. Still P2. I'm super happy because that's still great points for us, even though we're fighting with Niels and George for the championship. But we still maintain quite a healthy lead going into the last round. So I'm really happy with the result nevertheless.
Yeah, 20 points, we think, is the gap between you now, with you, of course, still 20 points in the lead. So looking good for the final race at Spa. Cody, I want to ask you, were you feeling a little bit nervous maybe ahead of this race? Because jumping into the car that has just won the last 3 races on the bounce, I mean, the expectation is that you're going to go and win again, but it's not easy to do, is it?
No, definitely not. I was really nervous when Matteo came into the pit lane, but as soon as I got out on the track, it helped because it was raining, and me and Niels both didn't know what to expect because it's different weather conditions, so it kind of helped a little bit. Just don't crash the car and just bring it home, and that's what I did.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing you can do, I guess, is bin it and lose all those championship points. It's got to be a slightly strange feeling, though, as a driver, jumping into a car that's right in the middle of a championship battle. You could have actually wrapped up the championship tonight if one or two other things had worked out in your favour. So does that affect your mindset at all, personally, going into your stint there at the second half, that extra pressure that you just can't afford to throw it all away?
Yeah, I mean, Michael and Malinowski have done a great job of winning the last, I think it was 3 rounds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely didn't help knowing that you've got to perform because they did, but I can't complain with the P2.
No, definitely not. And Majed, I don't think you'll be complaining about it either. It puts you, as I've said, 20 points, we think, ahead going into that last race. What's the game plan for Spa? First of all, do you think that is a track that the car will perform well at compared to the McLaren?
No, Spa is a McLaren track, and Spa is definitely not a Porsche track. It's opposite of Porsche track. Like, Porsche is really bad there. But we have custom BOP, and we never know what that's gonna give us, because today McLaren's had 15 kilograms of ballast only, while it's still a strong car nevertheless, and only got 15 kilos. We got 30 kilos, so we were struggling a bit more with the tire wear today and so on, right? So today it was McLaren's tracks, and so still P2 is nice for us. Next round, we don't know what BOP is gonna be like, the custom BOP that SimGrid is gonna provide us with. So since it's not a Porsche track, we actually may not get any ballast. And McLaren will probably get some ballast because it's a really strong car there. So Michael's gonna be back from his vacations, and yeah, we're just gonna do our best. We have good Spa setup. It's not the best car, but we know how to make it decent. And only thing we can hope for is the BOP that's gonna make the things even for everyone, and then we can excel there as drivers. We still have the points advantage, right? So we can always afford, even in the last round, not to finish ahead of McLaren. Of course, we still need to be in there among other cars, and we know that there are gonna be fast Ferraris on Spa, fast Astons on Spa, and we have a lot of them. So definitely we'll have to practice a bit with Michael. But yeah, we've won 3 races, P2, and first race of course wasn't the best, but that's still amazing run. So yeah, couldn't be more happy for now.
Excellent stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing what Spa will have for us in 2 weeks' time. For now, though, congratulations on second place, and we'll speak to you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
So Cody and Maciej Malinowski then, who are going to be leading the championship going to the final round, but they don't seem awfully confident, do they, that they're going to be able to beat George Boothby and Niels van der Kerkelt then. The UKOG 47 team finally getting their first victory of the season. And George, it's a long time coming, this really, isn't it? You've never been out of the top 5 all season, but it must have felt at times like that win just wasn't ever going to come.
Yeah, we had quite a few races where we were like near the front, like potentially maybe a win, but just it never happened until now. So yeah, we're very, very happy. I think we both drove as good as we could do today, and we just got lucky on the pit stop. Really, we went in right behind them. They made a tiny mistake in the pits, and there we go.
It's all about fine margins in this championship, isn't it, though? And you make the point there, you'd managed to close the gap down. I know that Matchetta was just telling us he was fuel saving a bit at the end of his first stint, but that meant that you went into the pit lane right behind him. In fact, it almost looked like you might hit him on the way into the pit lane. That was a bit sketchy, but because you were so close, that was able then to sort of allow you to capitalise on their mistake in the pits, which then, of course, put you out in the race lead. So it's important to keep pushing, isn't it, right down to the final few seconds of your stint.
Yep, it was well calculated, that pit entry. Absolutely no risk. But it was honestly, it was a fantastic race. I can't believe how much pace we both had on the rest of the field. Like us and the Porsche, like we both just both teams drove so well in the dry and the wet. I don't know, it was just a perfect race for us. Perfect race.
It certainly was the perfect result for you, but it was Niels that brought the car home for the race victory. And Niels, this is a circuit that I'd imagine you know quite well, so I bet you enjoyed that second stint.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to live pretty close to the track, about 5 minutes away, so I know it quite well. Always been one of my favorite tracks as well to drive, and just got lucky enough that I actually managed to put some practice in this week, because I haven't really been able to put a lot of practice in this entire season. But it was for this race, and we were just in a good position again, and the car, even though we were on a dry setup, obviously, it actually felt really good in the wet. I did a few laps when George was still in the car to try and sort out the tire pressures. Didn't really work out that well. They were pretty low towards the end, but all I had to do was just keep up the pace, which apparently, like George said, we were miles ahead of everyone. Like we were just pulling so much. So at that point, it was just a matter of keeping it on the black stuff, and we would be sorted. So yeah, very, very happy. It really felt quite cathartic, especially after the season we've had. I mean, we've been in P2 for the entire season pretty much, but we've had our downs in this season for sure. So yeah, it really felt amazing to take the win here.
You've got your first race win of the season then, but can you get that championship win? Because we're going to Spa now in 2 weeks, and we were just chatting actually to Malinowski, and he was saying, that's not really a good Porsche circuit. The McLaren should go well there. So do you think, Niels, that the championship might still be within your reach?
Who knows? I mean, after all, a lot of things can happen in racing. You never know. You can never really predict what's going to happen, especially in a round where the title gets decided. But Tortellini is right in saying that Spa isn't really a Porsche track, but it's definitely a Tortellini track. So yeah, we'll see about that, man. But we'll just push our bottoms off, and we'll see where we end up.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing that. Best of luck for next week, but huge congratulations, guys, on finally getting that first win of the season.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys. So George Boothby and Niels van der Kerkelt then have done it. They've got themselves a race victory, and Chaz, that was a really, really important time in the championship to do so, and in the toughest of conditions there. It was a race that really they kind of had to win, and they had to do it in really very changeable and very difficult weather conditions as well, and it was a pretty wheel-perfect performance from them in the end.
Yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal. You could argue that there was a very simple switching point, which was the pit stop, but at the end of the day, you have to get these things, as you just said there, wheel perfect. And from the very off, Boothby was all over the back of the car in front. The 992 Porsche never had it easy at any point in the race. And to be fair, even when Cody started closing in near the end of the race, the conditions just, unfortunately, sort of left him in a bit of no man's land, and he couldn't keep up that sort of whole reeling in of the race leader, and they didn't step a single foot wrong, and ultimately, like you say, it was the perfect time for them to get the win. I said at the top of the broadcast, they really, really needed it, and they certainly got it, but wow, they had to work for it very, very hard indeed there, so a hell of a lot of fun indeed.
Yes, and I hope you've enjoyed your return to the Sprint Cup, Chaz. It's no less competitive now, is it? It's still really, really close out there. The championship battle couldn't be much closer between these top two. And Michael Hamlin is just giving us a stat, which I'd love to say I worked out myself, but I'm not clever enough to do so. But he said that the average lap times for those top two, so if you take each and every one of their 55 laps, in the both across the dry and the wet stint of the race, their average lap time was 18 one-thousandths of a second apart over the entire race. 55 laps, wet, dry, regardless, nothing to choose between them. Chaz, we really couldn't ask for a more finely balanced championship decider in 2 weeks.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Even if I'm not here commentating on it, I'm going to be watching it. I'm going to be all over it. And to be honest, I look forward to it so much because, again, it's Spa. It's a track you never know what will happen at. There's always great racing there. The conditions could be just as difficult as they were today. I would like to think I'm a betting man in situations like that, but no. In no such circumstances would you find me throwing money at anything like that because you never know. It's going to be great to watch, though, either way, and I think those two teams have really sort of shown themselves to be the absolute stars of the show.
Yes, most definitely. No arguing with their speed here tonight, and we look forward to seeing what they can do at Spa in a couple of weeks' time. We hope that you'll all join us again for that championship decider then for Season 4 of the Sprint Cup here on the SimGrid. Lots more racing coming your way as well on the SimGrid. Do be sure to head over to their website, give them a like and a follow on social media, and that will keep you up to date with all of the racing that's going on. Not just the racing that's broadcast either. There are daily races that you can get involved with regardless of your skill or experience level. Get stuck in and enjoy racing with the SimGrid. If you are relatively new to sim racing, by the way, you can do a lot worse than going to the Coach Dave Academy, where you can get lots of advice on not only driving the cars, setting them up, learning all of the unique aspects of all of the different circuits on Assetto Corsa Competizione, and the Coach Dave Academy has helped many a novice sim racer become an awful lot quicker. Also, a big thank you to our partners at Thrustmaster. Be sure to head over to their website as well to have a look at everything they've got on offer. Some really exciting new products in the pipeline at the moment as well, and we thank them for their continued support. That, though, is everything that we have time for here tonight on the SimGrid. We hope you've enjoyed the racing here at Zandvoort. It certainly gave us plenty of thrills and spills, and it sets us up for a sensational championship decider in 2 weeks' time at the magnificent Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium. For now, though, from myself, Andy McEwan, Chaz Draycott, who has joined me this evening, Michael Hamlet and Mike Yao as well, our production crew. Thank you very much to all of to them for all of their help. We will see them in 2 weeks' time. We hope we'll see you then as well. For now, though, from everyone here at the SimGrid, it's good night.